Chapter 931. The few of them glared at Annie and asked, "Have you asked for our opinion if you want to pursue him? We are his girlfriends." "Can't I pursue him if he has a girlfriend? Of course I have to fight for my own happiness," Anne retorted. "You." Yi Ding Dang wanted to call her shameless, but she didn't say it out loud. After a while she said, "You have no part in it," and was confident and smiled sweetly. "That might not be the case. Don't think that we won't do anything to you just because you're a princess," Yi Ding Dang said angrily. "I've never thought of using my identity as a princess to pursue him. I'm just an ordinary girl who likes him." Yi Ding Dang was about to flip out when she was stopped by Fang Shishir. If it was anyone else they definitely wouldn't be able to stop Yi Ding Dang, but for some reason she could listen to Fang Shishir. Fang Shishir slowly shook her head. "There's no need. Tang Jing isn't someone who can be pursued by just anyone." In fact, she understood Tang Jing the best. Even though she was a bit angry before, once she calmed down and saw Tang Jing's reaction, she gradually understood. Annie's actions were to cut off the head and pick on the hot head, but Tang Jing was clearly rejecting her, so at this time she was being overbearing. She had a plan. If Tang Jing knew what she was thinking, he would definitely give her a thumbs up. What a smart girl. Since Fang Shishir said so, the others didn't do anything to stop Anne. Tang Jing spent the next few days in torment. Being sandwiched between too many women wasn't a happy thing. If he wasn't careful, he would lose sight of one and offend another. He would be scolded. He had been deliberately avoiding Anne, but Anne was like Sherlock Holmes. No matter where Tang Jing hid, she could always find him. Fortunately, the Yin family and Qin Padian often came to visit him, giving him an excuse to send Anne away. Many things had happened in the capital while he was away. The imperial city was still under tight lockdown. This once world-class tourist attraction had become a restricted military zone. Even the Yin family spies were unable to enter. However, it was speculated that the authorities had not given up yet. They wanted to dig 3 feet into the ground to find the 5-clawed golden dragon. When Tang Jing heard this, he shook his head and smiled indifferently. Let them do their useless work. However, there was another piece of news that Tang Jing did not expect. The Ye family had actually received strong support from the government and was developing vigorously throughout the country. Yin Padian sighed and said that this was the opportunity that Yi Xuanji had been looking forward to. The other party would definitely seize this opportunity firmly. Tang Jing shrugged his shoulders as he did not mind. The Yi family allied with the government, so what could they do? Society had undergone a huge change. Without the support of a true expert, the rise of a family was like a castle in the air. It could easily collapse. However, Yin Padian was a little serious. He said that he still had to pay more attention to the Ye family, as Yi Xuanji was not an ordinary person. Tang Jing laughed it off. Yin Padian and Qin Badian asked about the gains of Tang Jing's trip to Europe. Tang Jing gave a simple introduction and the two of them were completely shocked. The way they looked at Tang Jing was extremely complicated. This was an achievement that many people could not even dream of, but it was completed by Tang Jing with just a raise of his hand. Only now did they understand why Tang Jing did not put the Yi family in his eyes at all. The difference in vision between the two sides was like heaven and earth. Tang Jing repeatedly warned them not to tell anyone, and they all understood tacitly. On this day the weather was clear. The arrival of a group of people broke the silence of the villa. This group of people had different styles and there were old, young and young people. Tang Jing stood at the door to welcome them. His gaze was complicated, especially when it landed on one of them, Wu Junshan, his biological father. Wu Junshan also looked at him, filled with mixed feelings. Tang Jing nodded slightly, which could be considered as a greeting, and then shifted his gaze to the others. The Witch clan elder brought a few elites from the clan. This time he had asked the Witch clan elder to come here with a mission. Because with Anne here, he could not rashly take out the spar and let everyone absorb the energy to cultivate. That would be a confession without a fight. He was prepared to let the Witch clan elder bring the spar back to the island. The so-called sacred ground was naturally built on the island, and that was his base. In addition, the summer vacation had already begun. He was prepared to let Fang Shishir, Lu Qingmei and the others go to the island in the name of a vacation to secretly cultivate. This way he could avoid Anne. The spar was of great importance. Unless it was the Witch clan elder escorting it, he would not be at ease. Moreover, the Witch clan elder had repeatedly requested to see him, so he allowed it. When the elders and clansmen saw Tang Jing, they were extremely excited. They all stepped forward and bowed, calling out to Lord Envoy. Tang Jing looked at them with gratification. This group of Witch clan people had already firmly merged with him. Even if Chi Yu was revived, he might not be able to control them. Elder and the brothers of the witch clan, it's been a long journey. Everyone shook their heads. It's not hard hearing the envoy summons. We are excited. We all want to be like Ai Yuan, able to help the envoy and not stay on the island to live a comfortable life. Yi Yuan brought a group of clansmen to travel around the country to protect Tang Linger. Life on the island is not comfortable but a kind of preparation. When everyone is ready, I naturally look forward to everyone coming back to help me. Tang Jing said. The witch clan members that returned this time were at least fasting. The witch clan members had cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell and the god-slaying scroll, and their cultivation had advanced at a rapid pace. The witch clan was indeed worthy of being Chi Yu's old subordinates. Many people could not compare to their bloodline. Cultivation talent was hidden in his bloodline. Once it was activated, the potential that would erupt would be extremely dazzling. Yes, Lord Envoy. Everyone nodded. Wu Junshan was not surprised. He could see the admiration and respect that the witch clan members had for Tang Zheng from the bottom of their hearts during his daily life on the island. Tang Zheng's words were like an imperial edict. At the same time that he was gratified, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion. After operating in the martial sect for so many years, he had indeed subdued a portion of his trusted aides. However, even more people were disloyal to him and in the end even became his enemy. The new generation overtook the old and that was it. The witch clan members did not all live in the villa. Instead, they were arranged to live in some of the surrounding buildings. That was their residence. The villa had been attacked a few times, making Tang Jing more and more aware of the importance of safety. This was his home and he had to protect it in all aspects. He could not trust others, so arranging for the witch clan members to protect the villa was the safest method. The witch clan was also very happy to do this. Protecting the envoy's home was a great honor. Back then, when they were on the island, the competition for this opportunity could be said to be extremely intense. The witch clan elder and Wu Junshan entered the villa. Lan Yu and Wu Junshan looked at each other. Lan Yu nodded lightly with a trace of a smile on her lips. Wu Junshan's heart moved. He understood what his wife meant. She was saying that her relationship with Tang Zheng had improved. He was also very happy. It was a long and difficult road to win back Tang Zheng's respect, but he had to do it. However, looking at the room full of women, Wu Junshan slapped his forehead. He felt a headache coming on. Although he had heard of it, seeing it with his own eyes still shocked him. It was as if the most beautiful women in the world lived here. His son was much stronger than him in this aspect. He could not even handle a wife. He did not know how this kid dealt with women. As someone who had experienced it before, although it was his first time seeing these women, he did not think that they were really pure friends with Tang Zheng. As a man he knew this too well. The elder was not surprised. Even in ancient times, it was normal to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. He felt that it was natural for the strong to have more than one woman. However, it was the first time most of the women in the room had seen the 2 of them. They all opened their eyes wide in curiosity, especially when they found out that Wu Junshan was Tang Zheng's father, and had a bright idea and actually personally poured tea for him, causing the other girls to clench their teeth. This princess was indeed cunning to think of a bribe so quickly. Wu Junshan accepted it calmly. The other party's princess identity did not have much of a halo to him. His attention was mostly on Wu. Wu Junshan obediently went forward and bowed. Wu Junshan looked at her with approval. His cultivation had improved greatly. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Tang Zheng went straight to the point and said, I want to announce something. Shirshir and Ding Dang are already on summer vacation, so it's not good to stay at home, so why don't we go out and see the outside world? In addition, Teacher Lu has been working very hard during this period of time, so we'll go on vacation with the 2 of them. I will arrange for the elders to accompany you and protect your safety. When these words were spoken, everyone looked at each other in dismay. This was because to most people, this was a sudden attack and they did not know about it beforehand. Why did you send us away? Yi Dingdang keenly noticed the key point and suspiciously looked at Tang Zheng and Anne. Don't let your imagination run wild. I have business to do. What business is there that you can't tell us? Yi Dingdang asked. The so-called business was that he was preparing to make a trip to the Azure Dragon Palace. Moreover, he was not alone but gathered many people. Empyrean Fairy had to go, Tian Chanzi also had to go, Lan Yu and Wu were duty-bound, and as for Wu Junshan, when he heard the news, he rushed back even though he was far away. They were originally from the martial organization and were inextricably linked to the Azure Dragon Palace. They wanted to settle things with the Azure Dragon Palace, and this was something that Tang Zheng had no reason to stop. Once these people left, the villa's defensive power would be empty. Tang Jing did not feel at ease leaving everyone behind. Of course, he did not want to tell them the truth, fearing that they would be worried. Seeing Yi Dingdang aggressively ask, Tang Jing wished that he could pick her up and spank her. She was becoming more and more arrogant. Although he had been back for a few days, there were too many people around, so he did not have a chance to be alone with her. Otherwise he would definitely take care of her. Seeing that Tang Jing could not answer, Yi Dingdang suddenly realized and said, I understand. You must want to send us away so that you can be with her. Cough cough. Tang Jing almost choked to death on his saliva. What did this have to do with Anne? Anne's eyes lit up when she heard this. She looked at Tang Jing in surprise and happily said, What's wrong with that? Men should be given freedom. If you keep controlling them, then they will never grow up. Of course you want it to be like this. You're still pretending to be obedient. Yi Dingdang ridiculed. You must go on vacation. There is no room for discussion. Tang Jing stared and said unquestionably. Chapter 932. Looking at the stubborn Yi Dingdang, Tang Jing felt a headache coming on. However, she was not a cultivator, so it did not matter if she did not go to the island. Since that was the case, he would let her be. The corners of Yi Dingdang's mouth curled up into a smile as she coldly looked at Annie, as if to say that she was staring at her. And shrugged her shoulders. It did not matter, it was always a good thing to have one less competitor by her side. What about them? Fang Shishir pointed at Wu and the others and asked curiously. They still have other things to do, so there's no time to lose. They will leave tomorrow. So anxious? Fang Shishir was surprised. Yes, summer vacation is not long. If we leave early we can play for a few more days. Although everyone had many questions in their hearts, if Tang Jing did not say anything, no one could force him. Brother, what about me? Nana tugged at the corner of Tang Jing's clothes. Nana also wants to go out and play. Tang Jing looked at Empyrean Fairy and seeing her nod, he carried her and smiled affectionately. Of course you will go too. Nana immediately clapped her hands and said excitedly, That's great. Nana also wants to go out and play, but it would be good if Big Brother came with me. If you stick to Big Brother all day you won't grow up. Nana thought for a while, then firmly shook her head. No, Nana wants to grow up and become as beautiful as Big Sister and the others. Tang Jing laughed out loud and called the clan elder into the study room alone. The two of them talked for a long time, and the clan elder reported to him in detail about the situation on the island. When he heard that there were many new babies born in the witch clan, Tang Jing was pleasantly surprised. These babies were not comparable to the current adult witch clan. These babies were the new blood, the future of the witch clan. They could cultivate from a young age, so their future achievements would definitely be greater than the current witch clan. When the clan elder heard Tang Jing introduce the spar, he was overjoyed and said excitedly, If we have this spar, then our clansman's cultivation will be faster, and we will be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. Crystals are very important, so they must be closely guarded. Do you understand? Understood. The elder nodded heavily. However, there is another life form in this crystal stone. Even though I don't know what it is definitely alive. When we cultivate, the crystal stone will become transparent and everyone will see it. We must be careful because there will be a day when the crystal stone will be completely absorbed and the life form will be released. Tang Jing solemnly warned. The elder said without hesitation, Sir Envoy, rest assured. Our entire clan will be on guard. If the creature from beyond the heavens comes out, we will definitely capture it alive. No, don't capture it alive. Inform me when it's about to break free. I want to deal with it personally, Tang Jing said. Although the elder felt that he was making a mountain out of a molehill, he still agreed without hesitation. Shishir and sister may still don't know about this. When the time comes you will tell them. Their cultivation is not as good as yours, elder, so you have to guide them more. Elder, don't worry. I will pass on all my cultivation experiences to them. It's just that the island is remote. I don't know if they have the habit of living here. The elder said worriedly. Tang Jing smiled faintly and said that they were not young misses of rich families, so there was no need to worry about this. That night, everyone in the house sat at a large table to eat. It seemed to be happy and harmonious, but in fact there was an undercurrent surging. Tang Jing and Lan Yu's relationship was much more harmonious, but with Wu Junshan he was still cold. Yi Dingdang and An were fighting openly and secretly. A meal was like a war. In the middle of the night, a person secretly sneaked into Tang Jing's room. It was actually the reserved Fang Shishir. She was about to leave, so she finally put aside her shyness and cherished this rare moment with Tang Zheng. The two fought to their heart's content for most of the night before falling asleep. And who was next door did not sleep for most of the night. Although the soundproofing of the room was good, a woman's sixth sense still sensed that there must be another woman lying on Tang Zheng's bed next door. Of course, she was jealous in her heart, but there was nothing she could do. She silently comforted herself that if she persevered, the one lying on the bed would definitely be her. The next day when the sky was bright, Tang Zheng and Fang Shishir walked out together. Under everyone's gaze, although Fang Shishir was shy, her hand was tightly held by Tang Zheng. She could not escape at all, but she was very happy. This was the two of them openly showing their love, which was a treatment that no one else had ever received. The other women's eyes were burning, wishing that they could replace Fang Shishir. The witch clan elder took a look and left with the crystal stone. The crystal stone was taken out from Sumeru world. The witch clan elder did not have a heaven-level magic treasure storage bag, so he could only quietly put the crystal stone on a truck and drive it to the sea. He had already arranged for a ship to bring the crystal stone to the island. When everyone reluctantly left, Tang Zheng and the others were also ready to leave. At this time, Anne knew that Tang Zheng did not want to stay behind to accompany her, but also wanted to leave. She wanted to chase after him, but was rejected by Tang Zheng without hesitation. Yi Dingdang was immediately overjoyed, so Tang Zheng did not want to be together with Anne. She had wronged him. Tang Zheng, Empyrean Fairy, Tian Chanzi, Wu Junshan, Lan Yu, Wu Wu, and Li Xiaotian sat in two cars and directly drove out of the capital. But just as they left the capital, the number of cars decreased, and they realized that there was a tail following behind them. It was actually Anne. Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. And had really put in a lot of effort, but this time it was too dangerous, so of course he could not bring her along. Thus, Tang Zheng forcefully sent her back and let Yi Dingdang watch over her. Only then could he leave alone. As for Yi Dingdang and making a ruckus at home, Tang Zheng did not care. In any case, the two of them were evenly matched, so neither of them would be at a disadvantage. 3 days later, everyone arrived at the foot of the mountain where the Azure Dragon Palace was located. The road had long since disappeared, and they had been walking for nearly half a day. The Azure Dragon Palace was hidden in such a deserted place, no wonder no one could discover it. Li Xiaotian stared blankly at the mountain in front of her. Along the way she had many questions. Although she had lost her memories, her intelligence had not decreased in the slightest. These days she had already discovered many clues. When others faced her they were especially unnatural. Especially at the very beginning, there was even a hint of hostility mixed in. After such a long time of integration, this hostility gradually weakened. Although she wanted to integrate into this big family, there was always a feeling of being out of place in her heart. She gradually understood that before she lost her memories she must have been at odds with everyone. Perhaps she was a big bad person. This thought gave her a fright. She had never thought of herself as a bad person. She was kind-hearted, and the thing she wanted to do most was to help others. This time she saw Tang Zheng deliberately send away his confidants and bring her along. How could she not be surprised? She guessed that this might have something to do with her identity. What was her identity? She had silently asked herself many times, but there was no answer. She hoped to find the answer, but she was also somewhat afraid. If unfortunately she guessed correctly she was a bad person, then what should she do? She looked at her hands. If these hands had killed someone and were covered in blood. She clutched her head, not daring to continue thinking. Seeing her reaction, Tang Zheng was shocked. Now he was sure that she had completely lost her memories under the influence of the soul-searching technique, and was not pretending. "What's wrong with you?" Li Xiaotian suddenly raised her head and asked, "What are we doing here?" "There is a group of bad people here. They have harmed many people, so we need to deal with them," Tang Zheng said implicitly. "Who is that?" Li Xiaotian looked at him with burning eyes and asked. "Azure Dragon Palace." Li Xiaotian's eyes were blank. She shook her head and said that she had never heard of these 3 words. "It doesn't matter if you haven't heard of it. Since you are here to deal with bad people, why did you bring me along? I don't know martial arts. Moreover, I don't want to fight." Although she had once saved a little girl who was almost killed by a car, she still did not know that she knew martial arts. Her usual behavior was no different from ordinary people. Tang Zheng was silent. He did not know how to answer. Seeing his reaction, Li Xiaotian suddenly realized something. Her expression became very depressed. She nervously asked, "Am I a person from the Azure Dragon Palace?" Tang Zheng's eyelids fiercely jumped. He was surprised that her guess was so accurate. She was still so smart. How should he answer this? You don't need to answer. I already know the answer. I also finally understand why they were always on guard against me. They were hostile. So I really was a bad person in the past. Li Xiaotian miserably said. She looked as if she had lost her soul. Tang Jing had never seen such pain on her face. She looked as if she had lost her soul. It was as if her spirit had been sucked away in an instant. Tang Jing could not help but blame himself. Was he too cruel? He had already obtained information from her. Why did he have to bring her here? This was to open up her scars and then sprinkle a handful of salt on it. No matter how many bad things she had done in the past, from this moment on, Tang Jing no longer resented her. This was because he hated the old Li Xiaotian. Now she was a brand new Li Xiaotian. A true new life. Don't be sad. That is not the current you. You are now a good person. Tang Jing's comforting words were somewhat weak. But I was bad before. Li Xiaotian said, did I kill people before? Tang Jing did not lie and nodded lightly. Li Xiaotian burst into tears and squatted on the ground. This was out of everyone's expectations, especially Wu. She had always had a huge opinion of Li Xiaotian and always thought that Li Xiaotian was pretending to lose her memories. But at this moment, seeing Li Xiaotian's reaction, this belief was shaken. Could it be that she had really changed? Wu was not a petty person. When she confirmed that Li Xiaotian had really changed, the anger in her heart lessened by a lot. Looking at Li Xiaotian, she suddenly felt that he was a little pitiful. She bent down and gently patted Li Xiaotian's back, saying, don't be sad, what I hate is the past you. Actually, you're a good person now. Back then, your actions of saving that little girl had already moved me. Really? Li Xiaotian asked pitifully with tears streaming down her face. Wu nodded firmly. Of course it's true. Chapter 933. Although Wu hated evil as if it was his enemy, he was still a magnanimous person. Seeing Li Xiaotian reveal his true feelings, he sincerely said those words. Li Xiaotian wiped away her tears, stood up and said, thank you, I'm much better now. Why don't you go home first? Tang Jing said softly. Li Xiaotian thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, since I want to be a good person and break away from the past, then the best way is to face the past. Tang Jing secretly praised and said, then let's continue forward. This small episode did not really affect everyone's mood. On the contrary, because of Li Xiaotian's true feelings, everyone accepted her. Not long after, they arrived at a stream on the mountainside. A fisherman wearing a bamboo hat sat by the stream, holding a long bamboo fishing rod in his hand, with a straight hook hanging on the fishing line. In the clear stream, the fish circled around the empty hook, as if it was delicious and wanted to take a bite. Elder Angler. Tang Jing subconsciously called out. The fisherman did not even turn his head as he stared at the water, as if the fish were much more attractive than them. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at the fisherman in shock. This person looked like an ordinary old man who was infatuated with the forest, but in reality he was extremely deep. They could not see through him at all. The two of them looked at each other and read the meaning in each other's eyes. This fisherman was definitely a martial king. To them, the martial king realm was a realm that they yearned for, but it was not unreachable. Ever since they left the martial sect, the two of them had spent most of their time on the island, broadening their horizons and living with the witch clan every day. Although they were not cultivators, they had many things in common with cultivation. Their cultivation had also advanced by leaps and bounds, and they had already touched the threshold of the martial king realm, reaching the 9th level of the Great Master realm. Tang Jing knew that the fisherman was one of the 3 great consecrators of the Azure Dragon Palace. His cultivation was even higher than that of the fair-faced flying dragon, so he had naturally reached the martial king realm. Seeing that the other party did not react, he walked up and arrived behind the fisherman. The muscles on Elder Angler's neck twitched slightly, but Tang Jing still keenly noticed it. Tang Jing's footsteps were very light and ordinary, but in Elder Angler's heart, these footsteps had already conveyed many things. The person who came was an expert. He finally turned his head slowly and his gaze fell on Tang Jing's face. His eyes flickered as if he was trying to guess the other's identity. He did not know Tang Jing. Although he was a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Hall, he spent most of his time fishing here, unlike fair-faced flying dragon who was involved in the affairs of the Azure Dragon Hall. He hadn't even seen Tang Jing's photo before. However, his attention was quickly attracted by Li Xiaotian, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The news of Li Xiaotian's death had already been brought back by Song Yu, but why was she standing in front of him alive? How were these people related to her? Questions flashed through Elder Angler's mind, but when his gaze landed on Wu Junshan and Lan Yu, he could no longer conceal his shock. "It's you guys." He instantly knew who these people were because he recognized Wu Junshan and Lan Yu. Towards these two, even if he did not care about worldly affairs, he would definitely recognize them. "Li Xiaodan, you actually betrayed the Azure Dragon Hall, betrayed the High Lord," Elder Angler angrily said. Hearing him call out her name, Li Xiaotian became emotional and bit her lips. Tang Jing blocked Elder Angler's gaze and said, "Don't blame me for bullying a girl. If you have anything to say, come at me." "You're Tang Jing?" Tang Jing faintly smiled, tacitly agreeing. "You have guts, daring to come to the Azure Dragon Hall. Li Xiaotian submitted to you. Could it be that she did not tell you how powerful the Azure Dragon Hall is?" Elder Angler stood up and glared at Tang Jing like a tiger watching its prey. "The Azure Dragon Hall is powerful, but it is not invincible. Since you are a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Hall, I will first defeat you." With a tap of his finger, the Battle Soul Sword flew out of thin air and slashed towards Elder Angler. Elder Angler's eyes flashed. He lightly shook his wrist and the fishing line flew towards Battle Spirit, wrapping around the sword in an attempt to stop its attack. Battle Spirit shone brightly, but it was unknown what material the fishing line was made of, but it actually did not break. However, Battle Spirit's attack did not decrease. Elder Angler hurriedly withdrew his move. The fishing line loosened and like a snake, it turned around and shot towards Tang Jing like a dart. Break. Tang Jing gave a low roar, and the Battle Soul Sword's attack changed direction, directly slashing at the fishing line. Clang. Like a zither string breaking, the fishing line finally broke into two, but the hook still shot towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing coldly snorted. He stretched out his hand and a small black hole appeared in his palm. The fishing hook flashed and disappeared into the black hole. Elder Angler's expression became especially cold. Tang Jing's strength was high beyond his expectations. Moreover, with the help of others, he would not be able to resist at all. Immediately, he had the intention to retreat. However, Battle Spirit closed in step by step, not giving him the chance. In an instant, it appeared in front of him and slashed down. Wah! The air was like seawater, automatically splitting to two sides. A wave of oppressive sword chi rushed towards his face. He hurriedly dodged, but the fishing rod in his hand pointed towards Tang Jing. An inch longer was an inch stronger, that was for ordinary people. Although the fishing rod was very long, this advantage did not exist for Tang Jing. Tang Jing slightly retreated, dodging the attack. However, he still controlled his sword to attack from afar. A line of blood extended from Elder Angler's face all the way to his chin. A look of pain flashed in his old eyes. However, he was not cut in half because at the critical moment, he controlled the fishing rod to point at the ground. The fishing rod bent and he used the rebound force to fly backwards. Battle Spirit's sword only left a line of blood on his face and did not harm his life. He did not stop. The fishing rod tapped on the ground a few more times. Then, as if he was stepping on stilts, he quickly fled towards the top of the mountain. A cold light flashed in Tang Jing's eyes. Battle Spirit's sword chased after him. Just as the other party was about to disappear into the forest, Battle Spirit's sword caught up with him. A flower of blood bloomed on his back. He fell into the forest and completely disappeared. Chase. Tang Jing did not hesitate. He took the lead and chased towards the top of the mountain. The others were not willing to fall behind, but Li Xiaotian stood in place, not knowing what to do. She had forgotten how to use martial arts and how to increase her speed. Seeing this, Wu grabbed her hand and said, "Come with me." "Thank you." Li Xiaotian looked at her gratefully, allowing her to lead him as they chased towards the top of the mountain. When she got used to the speed, she gradually felt that her body's functions were completely activated. In the forest, other than the sound of the wind, there was only the sound of a few people rushing. The top of the mountain was in sight, and the pitch-black house came into view. Tang Jing subconsciously slowed down his footsteps and reminded, "We have already reached the core area of the Azure Dragon Palace. Everyone be careful." Everyone nodded in agreement. Finally, they stopped in front of the house and focused their gazes on it. There was still blood on the ground, disappearing behind the door. Tang Jing shouted in a clear voice, "Elder Angler, Lord, could it be that you want to be a coward and not come out?" "Nonsense." With a creak, the door opened. The Elder Angler stood at the door with a pale face. He held onto the door frame with one hand as if he could fall at any time. His entire body was wet from head to toe, but it was wet from blood. Furthermore, there were a few drops of blood hanging from the corner of his clothes. The Elder Angler said weakly, "Tang Jing, you are courting death. Don't think that just because you defeated me, you will defeat the Azure Dragon Palace. Since you dare to say such words, then show me your methods. I will wait and see. Tang Jing said indifferently. Blood guillotine attack. The elder angler clenched his teeth and suddenly shouted at the top of his lungs. So. More than 10 blood guillotine flew out from the black house and swept over everyone's heads. Tang Jing, Empyrean Fairy, and Tian Chanzi had already seen the power of the blood guillotine in the 100,000 Great Mountains. They did not completely let down their guard, but they also did not treat it as if they were facing a great enemy. However, the blood guillotine was used in conjunction with a formation. At this moment, the other party was in a hurry to meet the enemy and the formation was not completed. Tang Jing took advantage of the situation to rise up, and with familiar ease, he controlled Battle Soul to meet a blood guillotine, directly chopping it to the ground. Tian Chanzi pointed his finger and a sharp sword chi also struck a blood guillotine. As for Empyrean Fairy, she did not even look at it. Wu Junshan and the others felt waves in their hearts. This was the power that the Azure Dragon Hall relied on. It was indeed extraordinary. They were not willing to fall behind and fought back. Suddenly, a few people jumped out from the Black House. They were all master-level martial artists and were members of the Blood Guillotine. Seeing that their formation was disrupted by the other party before it was completed, they did not panic. Instead, they quickly fixed the formation's flaws and formed a complete formation. They attacked again, but the blood guillotines in the air became slippery like loaches. There was no way to attack. Empyrean Fairy finally did not remain indifferent. She coldly looked at the group and said, "You still want to use this thing to stop us? Some things can be done once but not twice." With a thought, the stately mountain and river map flew into the air and a small hill descended from the stately mountain and river map. Everyone was shocked. Before they could react, they saw the top of their heads turn black. Boom. The entire mountain trembled as the small hill landed on top of the black house. All the blood guillotines were crushed under the small hill, not a single sound could be heard. Seeing her move, Wu Junshan and the others were shocked speechless. This was the power of a celestial. Compared to it, they were like babies. Tang Jing was not surprised. The last time they faced the blood guillotines, they were restrained by the High Lord, so she could not use such a big move. This time, without the High Lord's restraint, the Empyrean Fairy used a big move right from the start. They could not resist at all. The Empyrean Fairy waved her hand and coldly snorted. Not far away, the angler looked at this scene with a pale face. Fortunately, he acted according to the situation and escaped in time. Otherwise, he would have been crushed by the small hill. Chapter 934. The heavens and earth were silent, as if even the wind had sensed the danger and took a detour. Suddenly the hill began to shake. Everyone's expression changed as they subconsciously cried out. The Empyrean Fairy's eyes narrowed as she looked at this scene suspiciously. Boom. With a loud explosion, the hill exploded, turning into large rocks that flew in all directions. Everyone was hit by the rocks and hurriedly used their cultivation to block them. When the rocks dissipated, they discovered that there was a person standing in the ruins. High Lord. He was wearing a mask and his cold gaze swept over everyone as he said, "You actually found this place." This was the first time that Wu Junshan and Lan Yu had seen a High Lord. Their expressions kept changing. This High Lord had deceived everyone and secretly controlled the martial sect. This was a great humiliation to Wu Junshan. That was why he took the initiative to come and settle this matter. At this moment, looking at the High Lord, he wanted nothing more than to charge forward and fight to the death. "High Lord, it's Li Xiaotian who betrayed us." Elder Angler hurriedly explained. "So she didn't die but betrayed us." The High Lord's gaze turned and stabbed Li Xiaotian's chest like a sharp knife. Immediately, she felt a strong sense of suffocation and her face became pale, but she gritted her teeth and held on. She righteously said, "I didn't betray you, I just turned from the dark to the light. You are a bad person and I am a good person." Good person? The High Lord ruminated on these two words and looked at her as if he didn't recognize her. He said, "You still want to be a good person?" "Of course." Li Xiaotian proudly raised her neck. The High Lord stared at her and suddenly said in a shocking voice, "You are not Li Xiaotian." He understood the original Li Xiaotian very well. That was a woman who would do anything to achieve her goals. How could she say that she wanted to be a good person? She should be the one who said that good people don't live long. Li Xiaotian didn't back down. Instead, he said directly, "Of course I'm not the Li Xiaotian you knew. That Li Xiaotian is already dead. This is my new life." Freshman. The High Lord repeated this absurd word. "Tang Jing, how did you do it? She was actually brainwashed by you just like that?" The corners of Tang Jing's mouth curled up into a smile. It wasn't easy to shock a High Lord like this. People tend to be kind. This is the law of nature and also the most basic human nature. She is a kind person deep down in her heart. It's only because you guys instilled too many wrong ideas that she went astray and became what she was in the past. Now she has already left behind her past and is a brand new self. Tang Jing said tirelessly. The Great Lord snorted in disdain. No matter how you did it, since she's already standing on the opposite side of me, I won't let her leave alive. Do you think you have the right to say that? I found your Azure Dragon Hall's lair. I won't let you leave alive, Tang Jing retorted. You won last time, but it doesn't mean that you'll win this time. The Great Lord's voice was powerful and full of confidence. Then we'll know once we try. The Empyrean Fairy spoke first. She was still brooding over the loss last time. This time she wanted to give the Great Lord a fatal blow. The Empyrean Fairy cast a spell. The mountain river map flew directly above the Great Lord's head. A powerful aura spread out from the mountain river map. The Great Lord's expression was normal. His fingers flipped and quickly formed a hand seal. At the same time, he slowly opened his mouth and spat out a syllable. This syllable sounded in the world, stirring up the world and reverberating in people's hearts. Everyone was shocked. Tang Jing, the Empyrean Fairy, and Tian Chanzi had seen the Great Lord's non-phase method. But from the first syllable, they had already judged that the Great Lord's power had greatly increased. The power of this syllable was already very terrifying. Boom! This syllable was like the most powerful gale between heaven and earth. It swept across the top of the mountain. In an instant, the ruins and rocks exploded. The second syllable came out of his mouth. It was more natural and majestic. Hum. 5 syllables came out of his throat in one breath. His chest, abdomen, and vocal cords resonated. After he spat out these 5 syllables, everyone felt a great pressure as expected. He spoke too fast. After the 5 syllables were uttered in an instant, the atmosphere between heaven and earth changed. Everyone felt suppressed by the terrible force falling from the sky and couldn't move at all. My mistake. This time I should have brought Linger with me. Because only her mind is pure and undistracted, she can avoid this pervasive non-phase method. Tang Jing couldn't help but regret. As soon as the 5 syllables came out, everyone seemed to have fallen into glue. Their movements became very slow, and the air seemed to have become incomparably sticky. Tang Jing secretly felt bad. When he was about to fight back, he heard the Empyrean Fairy shout, "Break!" The mountain river map shone brightly. Black things spewed out from the mountain river map. A monstrous flood washed down, as if it was going to directly break the Great Lord into pieces. At this time, the Great Lord opened his mouth again. A word penetrated layers of obstacles between his chest and abdomen and burst out from his throat. He had completely mastered the 6 words of the non-phase method. As soon as the 6th syllable came out, the atmosphere between heaven and earth changed dramatically, and the flood from the sky stopped. Time and space froze at this moment. Everyone had turned into puppets. However, the Great Lord's eyes fluctuated very fiercely. Obviously, this 6th word was something that he had just cultivated and was not proficient in. Moreover, using the non-phase method and spitting out the 6 words of the proverb consumed a lot of energy and mind. When he spat out the 6 words of the proverb, he must be undistracted. Therefore, when he restricted the opponent, he was also restricted and had no power to protect himself. However, the non-phase method attacked indiscriminately. As long as it was within the range of the 6 words of the proverb, as long as anyone had murderous intent, it would be difficult to escape and could not break through. In particular, he had spat out the 6th word. The power was even more incomparable. It was much more powerful than when he was in the 100,000 mountains. When Tang Jing and the others heard the 6th voice, they immediately knew that the situation was not good. They looked at the monstrous flood suspended above the Great Lord's head. It was as if it was frozen, motionless. This scene almost caused them to collapse, but they had no other choice. They could only watch all of this happen because they couldn't even move a finger. Tang Jing crazily operated his power, trying to break through this imprisonment, but he found that the non-phase method was really strange. The more anxious he was, the heavier his murderous intent, and the more he felt that there was a powerful force around him that was shrinking and squeezing his body, as if it wanted to crush him. This was the power of the non-phase method breaking through to the 6th level. The first 5 levels corresponded to the 5 syllables. Although it could affect people's actions, it had no real lethality and had to rely on external objects to attack. The flying guillotine came into being and made up for this flaw. But when the non-phase method broke through to the 6th level, the sixth syllable could be completely spoken, and the non-phase method was achieved. This was not only to imprison others but also to attack the other party. The attacked person would feel that there was an increasingly large and terrifying force squeezing their body from all directions. When the body finally could not resist this force, they would die. Even without the flying guillotine, it could still kill people in a flash. The Empyrean fairy's face became pale and she bitterly said, "The non-phase method is so powerful, I miscalculated." Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at each other and firmly said, "Even if we die, we must escape. We must not let him catch us all in one fell swoop. Little Zheng cannot have any accident." The two desperately operated their power, trying to offset this force, but it was completely futile. It was like a rope around their neck. The more they struggled, the tighter it became. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being strangled. Elder Angler was ecstatic to see this scene. Of course, he was clear about the power of the non-phase method. However, he did not expect that the Great Lord would come out of seclusion and actually reach such a level. He had truly cultivated the non-phase method. Who told you to be arrogant? With the Great Lord here, no one can overthrow the Azure Dragon Hall. Elder Angler happily said. Tang Jing unwillingly opened his eyes wide. He originally thought that with so many people, there would be a way to break the situation. Moreover, he had summed up the experience with the Empyrean Fairy in advance and discussed countermeasures. In the end, they determined that although they relied on Ling to break the situation last time, that was the first time they faced the non-phase method. This time, even if there was no Ling, they would absolutely not repeat the same mistake and let the Great Lord succeed. Because as long as they struck first, there would be a glimmer of hope. However, they never thought that the Great Lord would actually completely cultivate the non-phase method. When the 6 words were used, the power was much greater than expected. For a while they fell into the same predicament twice, and it was even more dangerous. The power created by the 6 words was absolutely not easy for them to break, so what should they do? The pressure on his body was getting bigger and bigger, as if his body was being squeezed by the power from all directions. Suddenly, Tang Jing felt that there was movement around him. A person gently lifted his foot and took a step forward. What the hell? Tang Jing ran past 10,000 alpacas in the play, but he could not move and could not see clearly what was happening around him. Who was this person who took a step forward? One must know that this was within the attack range of the non-phase method. Even the Empyrean Fairy, a master in the deity stage, could not escape, let alone other people. Could it be that this voice came from another supermaster? No. Tang Jing subconsciously denied. Listening to this voice, it seemed that this person had been standing beside them, indicating that they were together. He silently counted one by one, but could not think of anyone who could have this ability. Chapter 935. Finally, Tang Jing saw the person who came out. Li Xiaotian. The others also saw her, and it was incredible. How could she be safe and sound? Wasn't she full of murderous intent before? Tang Jing thought quickly and suddenly realized. Li Xiaotian lost her memory and was reborn. The murderous intent in her heart disappeared, and she became as pure and kind as a baby. This was the same as Linger, so she could not be affected by the non-phase method. Li Xiaotian looked at herself in surprise, and then looked at the others. She did not know why she could move freely and was not affected. The others looked at her in shock, especially the Lord and the dangling fisher. They knew her very well. In any case, she might have this ability. But everything in front of them made them believe how wrong their judgment was. Empyrean Fairy and the others, like Tang Jing, immediately understood the reason, and their eyes were filled with joy. It was really a pleasant surprise to bring her here this time. Tang Jing chose to forgive her, but he did not expect that now it would produce such an unexpected result. The deadlock of certain death was broken. Tang Jing could not wait to shout, "Li Xiaotian, go and attack the Lord. His non-phase method will naturally lose its power." Li Xiaotian bit her lips and hesitated. Tang Jing thought she was worried about her safety and was afraid of the Lord's counterattack. He quickly explained, "Don't worry, he is now a toothless tiger. He can't jump and threaten you." Li Xiaotian shook her head slightly. "I'm not worried about my safety. I just want to ask him why he wants me to become a bad person like before." The sadness and frustration in her words made people feel like their hearts were being twisted by a knife. "Li Xiaotian, from the day your master picked you up, your life belongs to the Azure Dragon Hall. What kind of person you want to become, of course, is up to me. There is no reason," the Lord said bluntly. Li Xiaotian's tears fell from the corner of her eyes. "Have you never considered my feelings? What do you feel? The only thing you have to do is follow my orders." Li Xiaotian, if you turn back now and kill those people, I can spare your life. Otherwise your fate will be the same as theirs. You will die without a burial ground. The Great Lord's tone was still unyielding. No. Li Xiaotian suddenly let out a heart-wrenching roar. You have no right to decide my life. That's not the life I want. The Great Lord's eyes became very sharp as he stared at her. Suddenly he had an idea and said, You lost your memory, right? Tang Zheng's head trembled. The High Lord was indeed very powerful. He had actually seen through the clues. Li Xiaotian coldly said, I have lost my memories. That memory was the darkest moment of my life. To be able to remove it from my mind is my greatest fortune. I see. I finally understand. Tang Jing, you really have a good method. You actually used this kind of method to make her betray me. Tang Jing coldly snorted and said, A just cause enjoys abundant support while an unjust cause finds little support. Everyone has a scale in their heart. Let them go. Otherwise I won't be polite. Li Xiaotian threatened. Do you have the guts to deal with me? The Great Lord's aura was very strong. He could see an intense fear and timidity in Li Xiaotian's eyes. This was no longer the decisive killing her from before. Li Xiaotian, don't be afraid of him. He's just bluffing. He can't hurt you. Tang Jing hurriedly reminded her. He was deeply afraid that she would be scared by the other. I'm not afraid of him. Li Xiaotian shook her head. The fear in her eyes gradually disappeared. Instead it became very firm. She walked step by step towards the Great Lord. A trace of panic flashed in the depths of the Great Lord's eyes. He bluffed and said, Stop. Do you want to die? I've already died once. How could I be afraid of death? Li Xiaotian looked very indifferent. She finally walked in front of the Great Lord. The Great Lord could not hide his panic. He watched as she stretched out 2 fingers and poked his eyes. This action did not have the slightest murderous intent. It was as if she was taking a stroll. It was exactly this action that did not trigger the slightest attack from the non-phase method. Li Xiaotian did not use martial arts, but if those 2 delicate fingers were inserted into the Great Lord's eyes, his pair of eyes would certainly be difficult to protect. Finally the Great Lord could not stand it anymore. He shouted, I'll kill you. In order to save his life he had to give up the non-phase method. In an instant, everyone regained their ability to move. The Great Lord attacked Li Xiaotian, intending to kill her directly. Stop. Tang Jing had already expected the Great Lord's reaction. As soon as he regained his freedom, the shooting sun arrow flew out like lightning. The Great Lord's hand was about to hit Li Xiaotian's head when the shooting sun arrow arrived in front of his face. If he insisted on killing Li Xiaotian, then he would also die without a doubt. The Great Lord's eyes flashed with a strong unwillingness. He had no choice but to retreat. The shooting sun arrow flew past his cheek. Boom. The shooting sun arrow shot into the distant mountain rocks and the rocks were torn apart. At the same time, Tang Jing came to Li Xiaotian's side. He took her in his arms and flew back. The Great Lord roared, Tang Jing, I'll kill you. Tang Jing sneered, Let's see who will kill who. Will you protect her? Letting go of Li Xiaotian, he turned around and rushed toward the Great Lord. In an instant the 2 people fought. The sky darkened, sand and stones flew, and it was abnormally terrifying. Tang Zheng was a first-grade Yuanian cultivator, but after the Great Lord went into seclusion this time, not only did he recuperate from his injuries, his cultivation had also increased greatly, and he had already reached the 9th grade martial king. Amongst the warriors in the past 100 years, there was no doubt that he was the one with the highest cultivation. Compared to him, Tang Zheng was also much weaker. It was just that the Great Lord's non-phase method was forced to be helpless and could not be used, so his fighting strength was greatly reduced. Furthermore, Tang Zheng had the War Soul Sword, Heaven-Shocking Bow and Shooting Sun Arrow, so his fighting strength naturally increased greatly. For a moment, the 2 of them were unable to determine the victor. However, this was only a matter of time because Tang Zheng was not a match for the Great Lord in the end. The Great Lord finally found a flaw and struck Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng flew backwards and spat out blood. He immediately stood up and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The Great Lord took advantage of the situation and attacked again. I've played enough. The Empyrean Fairy shouted coldly, and came in front of Tang Zheng, taking on the Great Lord for him. The Great Lord faced the Empyrean Fairy and the pressure increased. He immediately retreated, but was still forced back by the Empyrean Fairy. Tang Zheng secretly sighed. Although he had reached the 1st grade of Yuaning, he was still weak. However, this battle with the Great Lord had already benefited him a lot. Looking at the battered and exhausted Great Lord, Tang Zheng made up his mind. He turned his gaze and stared at the elder angler who was staggering and quietly escaping into the forest. The old fisherman was not an idiot. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, he thought of sneaking away. As long as there was life, there was hope. "Elder angler, do you still want to leave?" Tang Jing roared. With a point of his finger, the war soul sword flew towards the elder angler. The elder angler turned his head and saw the war soul sword flying towards him. He had almost lost his life to the war soul sword, so he was especially afraid of it. Thus he subconsciously waved his arm. With a flash of cold light, a fishing rod appeared in his hand, and he faced the war soul sword. Kacha! The war soul sword slashed the fishing rod and the war soul sword broke into two. The elder angler simply abandoned the war soul sword and rushed into the forest. Tang Jing followed him like a shadow, and chased after him without a word. Seeing this, the great lord roared and narrowly dodged the Empyrean fairy's attack. Then he did not dare to stop and rushed into the forest. "Chase!" The Empyrean fairy shouted and chased after him like lightning. The others also reacted as if they had just woken up from a dream. Especially Wu Junshan, it was his first time seeing the Empyrean fairy's skills. It was truly shocking. The Azure Dragon Hall Great Lord, who was once invincible in his heart, was only SOSO. He was actually chased to the point of fleeing. He saw the elder angler jumping up and down in the forest like a monkey, his figure erratic. He was clearly using the familiar terrain to try and get rid of Tang Jing. How could Tang Jing let him succeed? He immediately drew his bow and the shooting sun arrow left the bowstring with a "so" sound. Seeing this scene, the elder angler was almost scared out of his wits. He no longer had a weapon in his hand, so he had no way to block this arrow. He watched as the shooting sun arrow flew closer and closer. Although he used all his skills, he dodged the shooting sun arrow. However, before he could catch his breath, he found that another arrow was already waiting for him in the direction he dodged. Although he was a second-grade martial king and Tang Jing was only a first-grade yuaning, Tang Jing had two saint artifacts. Even if there was a difference of one level, Tang Jing could still kill him. In the end, the elder angler had no chance to dodge. He watched as the shooting sun arrow pierced his chest, the tail of the arrow still trembling in his chest. A heart-wrenching scream burst out from his throat. Then, the scream slowly weakened, and the light in his eyes gradually dissipated. Finally, all the sounds came to an abrupt end. The world was completely silent. The elder angler fell backwards. Bang! He fell to the ground, his eyes wide open, and he breathed his last. The dignified Azure Dragon Hall Great Lord ended his life just like that. The Great Lord happened to see this scene from afar. His eyes were about to split open as he roared, "Tang Jing, I want you to pay with your blood." Tang Jing coldly snorted and said, "Your Azure Dragon Hall has killed so many cultivators over the years. You only have yourselves to blame for all of this." The Great Lord did not attack. Instead, he chose a small path and fled to the back of the mountain. "You want to escape? In your dreams?" Tang Jing chased after him. The Empyrean fairy also took the lead and chased after him. She expressionlessly looked at the dead elder angler, then focused her attention on the escaping Great Lord. When the others saw the elder angler's corpse, their reactions were much greater, especially Wu Junshan and Lan Yu. A dignified martial king had actually died in the hands of their son. All kinds of feelings welled up in their hearts. They were left far behind by their son. Tang Jing chased the Great Lord to a cliff in the back of the mountain. The mountain wind was biting cold. The 10,000 zhang cliff was a hopeless situation with no way out. The Great Lord also stopped. "You finally can't escape. You've always been curious about what kind of face you have under that mask." Tang Jing also stopped and stared at the Great Lord like a tiger eyeing its prey. Chapter 936. The High Lord looked at the group of people who were eyeing him covetously and laughed sinisterly. "Do you think you can kill me like this? You already have nowhere to run. Do you still dare to jump off the cliff? This is a bottomless abyss. No matter how high your martial arts are, I don't believe you can survive." Tang Jing said firmly. Even if I die, I won't fall into your hands." The High Lord was filled with righteous indignation. "Then do you dare to jump?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" After the High Lord finished speaking, he turned around and jumped off the cliff. Everyone cried out in alarm. They were truly frightened by this action. The High Lord actually jumped off the cliff to commit suicide. The High Lord's figure quickly disappeared into the fog below the cliff. Tang Jing stretched his neck to look at this scene. For a moment he was at a loss. The others also leaned over the cliff to look. The biting cold wind blew up from the cliff as if it wanted to sweep them down. Everyone retracted their necks and took a few steps back to distance themselves from the cliff. They looked at each other in dismay. He died just like that? Wu Junshan asked blankly. Ever since he knew of the existence of the Azure Dragon Hall, he was extremely afraid of the High Lord. But the person who made him so afraid died so easily. He found it hard to accept. Tian Chanzi said, although the High Lord is very powerful, but after all there is a limit. Facing so many experts, he had no way to escape. Jumping off the cliff to commit suicide would be a bit more enjoyable. Lan Yu shook his head in disappointment. It's just a pity that I don't know what kind of face is under that mask. Little Zheng said that there was still a jade-faced flying dragon, but I didn't see any trace of him. Wu and Li Xiaotian stared at the cliff. Wu felt relieved, while Li Xiaotian felt a sense of relief. On the other hand, Tang Zheng and Empyrean Fairy were extremely calm. Their gazes intertwined as they looked at each other deeply. Unknowingly, they saw something unusual in each other's eyes. Suddenly, their eyes slightly changed as they said at the same time, something is wrong. Maybe he is not dead. With Tang Zheng's understanding of the High Lord was definitely not someone who was willing to accept his fate. Even if he was in a desperate situation, he would not give up hope and not make a final struggle. This was completely out of line with his character and style. Therefore, the two of them determined that the High Lord was not dead. Hearing their words, the others subconsciously looked at the two of them in confusion. Although the Great Lord's martial arts were powerful, this was still a 10,000 zhang cliff. He did not have wings, nor did he have the ability to fly. How could he not die? Tang Jing understood everyone's doubts very well. He explained, my lord has been plotting for so long and has been waiting in the dark for an opportunity to take action. If he jumped off the cliff so easily, wouldn't he be too stupid? Then how could he secretly control the martial sect, Li Palace and Sword Pavilion? This was absolutely illogical. The others thought about it carefully and also realized what was going on. This was indeed the case. Everything was too strange. I'll go down and take a look. Tang Jing made up his mind. I'll go too. Tian Chanzi and Empyrean Fairy said in unison. Tang Jing shook his head and said, Tian Chanzi, you go down with me. Fu Yao, you stay with the others just in case. These people could not fight against the High Lord, and they did not know what dangers were lurking in the dark. Of course, they could not easily leave them here alone. Empyrean Fairy was the strongest, so she was the most reliable person to stay behind and take care of them. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi immediately jumped down from the cliff. However, a light flashed under their feet, and they were already flying on their swords. There were layers of fog in front of them. They were very careful, afraid that there would be unknown dangers in the fog. They safely passed through the fog and their eyes suddenly opened up. The ground was already in sight, but the towering trees were small. It was obvious how tall they were. He definitely did not fall. Let's pay attention to the cliff and look for him. Tang Jing analyzed. Tian Chanzi agreed wholeheartedly, and the two began to look for him on the cliff. Their flying speed was very slow, so the two searched very carefully. Not long after, Tang Jing shouted, Tian Chanzi, there's a cave here. The cave was not small and it was as tall as a person. Moreover, there were some fresh traces at the entrance of the cave. The rocks had been crushed. He definitely escaped into this cave. I already knew that he had a backup plan so he wouldn't die so easily. Luckily we found him. Otherwise, if we waited for him to escape, it would be difficult for us to find him again. Tang Jing rejoiced. Let's go in. Tian Chanzi could not wait and rushed in front. His cultivation was higher than Tang Zheng's, so if there was any danger, he would naturally have more defensive power. The entrance of the cave was a little damp, but after a few meters it was dry. The mountain wind blew in from the entrance, and the air was not turbid. Instead it was clear. The end of the cave could not be seen, and they did not know where it extended. The two looked at each other and said in a low voice, could it be that we can escape from this mountain through this cave? Could it be that this is the Azure Dragon Palace's backup plan? Tang Jing did not know. This was something that even Li Xiaotian did not know. In the entire Azure Dragon Palace, perhaps only the High Lord knew. It was no wonder that he deliberately led everyone to the back of the mountain. It was because he had already thought of using this plan to escape. Let's go quickly. Hopefully we can catch up to him. Tang Jing said without hesitation, his nerves tense. Okay. Tian Chanzi agreed without hesitation. Then the two chased after him as fast as lightning. The deeper they went, the darker the cave became. In the end it was completely dark. The two were not in a hurry to light up the cave. Instead they groped around in the dark. They did not know where the High Lord was hiding. If they lit up the cave they would expose themselves and alert the High Lord, making it harder for them to catch him. The two did not make any sound of footsteps at all. Even their breathing was controlled so that it was almost inaudible. They were like ghosts quietly moving forward. They walked farther and farther and felt that they seemed to have reached the center of the mountain. This cave actually led to here, which was really surprising. Suddenly, a faint light came from the front, illuminating the cave. The two subconsciously slowed down and looked at each other. They knew that they were very close to their target. Finally, the light became more and more intense. The cave seemed to be lit by fluorescent lights as if it was daytime. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi's pupils shrank. The scene in front of them suddenly became clear. The cave turned into a hall, and there was something erected in the middle of the hall. When Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi saw this thing, their hearts could not help but beat violently. Their pupils also widened. This was a crystal. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi were very familiar with crystal. They had just brought back a large piece from the Swedish royal family. And this crystal was even bigger. They did not know what was hidden in it. At that time, the crystal was left behind by a meteorite falling on the ground. Could it be that this crystal was also left behind? But they did not know why it fell into the hands of the Azure Dragon Palace. The target they were looking for was in front of them. The High Lord was standing in front of the crystal attentively. He looked excited and whispered in a low voice as if he was whispering to someone. No matter what the situation is, let's catch him first. Tang Zheng decisively made a decision. The High Lord had gone through untold hardships to get to this crystal, and he was rambling like a person on the verge of death. But Tang Zheng had a very bad premonition. The High Lord had gone through so much trouble. There must be a purpose, and it was far from being as simple as it seemed. Tian Chanzi also had the same concerns. Of course, he also had the same countermeasures. He saw that he went straight to the High Lord. The High Lord turned a deaf ear, as if he did not know that there were two enemies standing behind him. Humph, let's see how long you can stay calm. Tian Chanzi stretched out his big hand and grabbed the High Lord. The High Lord cleverly dodged, then slipped behind the crystal and looked at the two with a sneer. Tian Chanzi caught nothing, but he was not discouraged. Facing a master like the High Lord, it was normal to miss in one hit. Tian Chanzi was not discouraged. He shouted, "Let's see how long you can be arrogant." After saying that, he was ready to go over the crystal and capture the High Lord. Just then Tang Zheng shouted, "Be careful." Tian Chanzi's movements suddenly froze, and then he retreated like lightning. When he looked carefully he was overwhelmed with shock. The huge crystal began to change. It became transparent, but there was no strange creature inside. Instead there was a person, a woman. The woman was in her 30s. Her hands were closed and she was dressed in ancient clothing. There was a classical charm between her eyebrows. This scene shocked both Tang Zheng and Heaven Monk quite a bit. Why wasn't there any other unknown creature inside the spar, but a person? The crystal was a foreign object. Could it be that this woman was also from another world? There were people in another world and they were not all strange creatures. For some reason when he saw this woman, Tang Zheng's heart was suspended. He had a very bad premonition. The two looked at each other not knowing what to do. Since the High Lord deliberately came here, could it be that there was something strange about the crystal, or could it be that it could help him? The two were puzzled. Seeing the High Lord's provocative face behind the crystal, Tian Chanzi finally could not bear it and was about to rush over and beat him. But at the critical moment Tang Zheng pulled him back, because he saw that the crystal was shrinking. Before long half of it disappeared. Tang Zheng fiercely pulled Tian Chanzi's clothes and reminded him, "This crystal is strange. It keeps shrinking. It is completely different from our crystal." Tian Chanzi also nodded in agreement. This was contrary to common sense, so it was definitely not a good thing. The crystal was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. The crystal was like melting ice, but there was no dripping water, nor was there a dense mist. The powerful energy was completely restrained and gathered in the woman's body. Both of them were stunned. They were very clear about how powerful the energy contained in a crystal was. The energy of such a large crystal was completely integrated into the woman's body. How strong was her body to be able to hold so much energy? Even the sea could not hold hundreds of rivers. Chapter 937. What kind of eyes were those? They were as vast as the stars, making people subconsciously sink into them and unable to extricate themselves. If one's cultivation was weak, they would be directly immersed in them and would not be able to control themselves. Tang Zheng suddenly remembered that the eyes of the unknown creature in the crystal had many similarities with this woman. Could it be that this was a characteristic of the members of that world? He did not know the answer, but he realized that the situation had become troublesome. He reminded, Tian Chanzi, be careful of her. The Great Lord sneered, it's too late. Consecrator, kill these two. Consecrator. Tang Zheng was shocked. The Azure Dragon Palace Hall had a total of 3 consecrators. Besides the Elder Angler and the fair-faced Flying Dragon, there was also the most mysterious female consecrator. It was actually this person. Li Xiaotian had only heard of her name but had never seen her before. As far as she knew, even her master, Granny Li, had never seen her before. No one would have thought that this person was actually in the cliff cave behind the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, and was even sealed in a crystal. Many questions appeared in Tang Zheng's mind. Since this person was a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace Hall, could it be that she was not a person from another world? But how could she merge into the crystal and absorb the energy of the crystal in an instant? No one gave him an answer. End of story. The female consecrator's eyes flashed coldly, and she was already attacking the two. Retreat. Tian Chanzi suddenly shouted. His senses were sharper than Tang Zheng's, so he had already realized how powerful this person was. Tang Zheng had a telepathic connection, so he turned around and ran, Tian Chanzi bringing up the rear. Whoosh. The two returned to the dark cave one after the other, and ran out of the cave as fast as lightning. The sound of the wind whistling behind them was very clear that the female consecrator was not far behind them. You go first. Tian Chanzi pushed Tang Zheng and turned around to face the female consecrator. Tang Zheng's heart trembled and he subconsciously shouted, Tian Chanzi, be careful. He did not insist on staying. Since this female consecrator was so powerful, he had to let the Empyrean fairy deal with her. Therefore he tried his best to escape from the cave and flew to the peak of the mountain on his sword. Immediately he heard a loud rumbling sound behind him. It was obvious that Tian Chanzi was fighting with the female consecrator. Tian Chanzi, you have to hold on. Tang Zheng prayed silently. He passed through the fog and saw the figure on the mountain peak. He shouted, Fu Yao, go and save Tian Chanzi. Whoosh. The Empyrean fairy swooped down and flew past Tang Zheng, disappearing into the mist. The others asked in panic, what's going on down there? Tang Zheng landed on the mountain peak. Seeing everyone's anxious expression, he hurriedly comforted them. Don't worry, everything is under control. However, his heart was beating like a drum. That female consecrator was too hard to fathom. He did not know who was stronger between her and the Empyrean fairy. Boom, boom, boom. Loud noises came from below. The fog rolled and the mountain peak trembled. The sound of fighting was very fierce. Suddenly, a few figures rushed out of the fog. The first one was Tian Chanzi. He looked a little embarrassed and had several wounds on his body. Tang Zheng was shocked. Tian Chanzi was already in the first tier of the semi-god realm, but he still looked so embarrassed. It was obvious how terrifying this female consecrator was. However, Tian Chanzi was not seriously injured, which was a blessing in disguise. The Empyrean fairy and the female consecrator rushed out of the fog together. The fog had been completely dispelled, as if it had been cut into pieces by thousands of swords. Seeing the battle between the two of them, the others couldn't help sucking in a cold breath. The two of them were completely floating in the air, and every move they made was extremely fierce. Even though they were very far away, there was a suffocating feeling that made it hard for them to breathe. The Empyrean fairy's magic weapon was a divine weapon, while the female consecrator had a string of bells on the back of her hand. When she shook her arm, the bells wouldn't stop ringing. The sound of the bells seemed to be magical. As soon as the demonic sound entered their ears, they felt their bodies become light, as if their souls were about to leave their bodies. Everyone, be careful of the demonic sound of the bells. Tang Zheng quickly calmed down and reminded them anxiously. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. They felt like their hearts were swaying and they almost lost their minds. Immediately, everyone felt the power of the bells. As the bells shook, the crisp sound spread between heaven and earth. Circles of ripples swept toward the Empyrean fairy like waves after waves. The Empyrean fairy looked serious. Since she woke up, this was the first time she faced a threat. Her opponent's bells were also divine weapons. The key was that her opponent's strength was slightly higher than the 100 Faces Star Sovereign. For the time being, the Empyrean fairy couldn't determine a winner. The two sides were in a deadlock. Seeing the two fighting fiercely, Tang Zheng's thoughts ran wild. He glanced down the cliff and happened to see the Lord standing at the entrance of the cave, looking up at the battle in midair. Tian Chanzi, Let's deal with the Lord, Tang Jing suggested. Tian Chanzi was also watching the fierce battle without blinking. In his mind he recalled his thrilling battle just now. He almost died at the hands of the female consecrator, Tang Jing. He couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Where did this female consecrator come from? How could she be so powerful? She was also in the divine transformation realm. The strangest thing was that she was also a cultivator. The Azure Dragon Palace had always regarded cultivators as their mortal enemy. Why would they have a cultivator as a consecrator? There were too many contradictions and he couldn't figure it out. After hearing Tang Zheng's reminder, Tian Chanzi immediately looked at the Lord standing at the entrance of the cave from afar. His killing intent surged. Whoosh! He turned into an afterimage, disappeared, and swooped down at the Lord. The Lord's expression changed when he heard the sound of something breaking through the air and the figure getting bigger and bigger. Tian Chanzi was still in midair when he slashed down with his sword. Only this sword was left in the world. The sword light flashed and the sword chi was thousands of rays. In an instant, it fell at the entrance of the cave. Panic flashed in the Lord's eyes. He didn't dare to fight back, but he didn't retreat into the cave. Instead he jumped off the cliff. Boom! With a loud noise, the entrance of the cave collapsed and turned into a pile of ruins. It buried the entrance and splashed up smoke and dust. The High Lord fell down quickly. A strong wind blew past his ears, causing his clothes to flutter in the wind. He suddenly raised his head to look, just in time to see Heaven Monk chasing after him like a shadow. The Lord didn't have the ability to fly, so he was at a disadvantage when facing Tian Chanzi. The Lord's toes touched the cliff, and the momentum of his fall was reduced sharply. He finally stabilized his body. He didn't know when, but there was a long sword in his hand. With a shake of the sword, he greeted Tian Chanzi who was falling from the sky. Tang Zheng and others had only seen him use non-phase method before, but they had never seen him use swordsmanship. At this moment, seeing this swordsmanship, Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi's pupils shrank at the same time. They were all masters of swordsmanship, so they judged the power of this swordsmanship at a glance. Ding! With a crisp sound, the sword in Tian Chanzi's hand and the sword in the Lord's hand were against each other. The two swords bent back involuntarily and bounced back. Clang! Both of them flew backwards, but Heaven Monk only took a step back before stopping. Then a sword came from the west, Heaven flying immortal. The Lord's sword flashed and the sword flowers filled the sky. In an instant they intertwined into a sword light. Kacha! The sword light dissipated, and the Heaven flying immortal broke all of the Lord's swordsmanship. It was extremely simple. With a flash of blood, the tip of the sword directly pierced the Lord's chest. Blood splashed. The Lord was quick-witted and jumped off the cliff directly, not letting the long sword pierce his chest too much. He was lucky to escape, but his eyes flashed with deep sadness. Once non-phase method was useless, he couldn't do anything to Tian Chanzi. Tian Chanzi didn't let him go. He chased after him and the two fell off the cliff quickly. Every once in a while, the High Lord would stomp on the walls of the cliff to slow down his fall. In the air, the female consecrator and the mysterious Lady of the Nine Heavens were locked in a fierce battle. When they suddenly saw this scene, they turned pale with fright. They immediately abandoned the mysterious Lady of the Nine Heavens and turned to rush towards the Heaven Monk in an attempt to save the High Lord. Tian Chanzi suddenly felt a cold, murderous aura behind him. He was shocked. The magical sound of the bell had poured into his ears. His soul suddenly trembled and his movements subconsciously slowed down a bit. While he was at a loss of what to do, a shooting sun arrow flew over from afar. The female consecrator's eyes turned and coldly stared at Tang Zheng who was standing in the distance. Her eyes were cold. Her jade hand quickly reached out, and in a flash she firmly grabbed the shooting sun arrow. Suddenly she was pushed forward a few steps by the shooting sun arrow. She quickly stabilized her body and turned around, firmly locking on to Tang Zheng. "Go to hell." She softly said these two words. With a wave of her hand, the shooting sun arrow flew towards Tang Zheng. Its speed was not inferior to the previous one. Tang Zheng knew the power of the shooting sun arrow and quickly took out the holy armor shield. Clang! With a crisp sound, the shooting sun arrow fiercely hit the holy armor shield. Tang Zheng felt as if he was hit by a high-speed train. He quickly retreated. His arm was numb, and the holy armor shield flew out of his hand. Fortunately, the holy armor shield was a heaven-grade treasure. Although the shooting sun arrow was a sacred tool, it was not used with the heaven-shocking bow, so its power was greatly reduced. Otherwise, the holy armor shield would not be intact. Tang Zheng was well aware of this, so he immediately stabilized his body and picked up the heaven-shocking bow and the shooting sun arrow in mid-air, afraid that his two treasures would fall off the cliff and disappear without a trace. The female consecrator's pupils constricted. She was extremely dissatisfied with the result, but the High Lord was in danger. She could not care less about Tang Zheng, so she abandoned Tang Zheng without hesitation and turned to attack Tian Chanzi, trying to save the High Lord. The High Lord was lucky enough to escape from Tian Chanzi's hands and gasped for breath. Tian Chanzi dodged from afar. Only then did he feel the overwhelming killing intent behind him, causing him to not dare to advance rashly. With this female consecrator, the High Lord had reversed the situation and was almost invincible. The female consecrator stood beside the High Lord and looked at the group of people expressionlessly. Empyrean Fairy and the others also subconsciously stopped their attacks. The short battle had already allowed them to have a rough understanding of each other's strength, and they understood that they would not be able to defeat each other in a short period of time. Who exactly are you? Empyrean Fairy was extremely curious about this woman who was on par with her. The female consecrator said expressionlessly, Azure Dragon Palace's consecrator, Xian Yin. Why are you helping the Azure Dragon Palace? You are a warrior, why are you helping the enemy? Tang Jing asked first. Chapter 938. Facing Tang Zheng's question, Xian Yin remained indifferent and coldly replied, Although I am a cultivator, I am not the same as you. What do you mean by that? Tang Zheng was puzzled. Because I am not a cultivator from this world, I am naturally different from you. Why can't I be your enemy? Xian Yin said. These words were like a clap of thunder, causing everyone to be dumbstruck. Tang Zheng's head trembled and he immediately asked, If you are not a cultivator from this world, then which world are you from? He had previously guessed that Xian Yin was from another world, but he had later denied it. Now that he heard this answer, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. It turned out that he had guessed correctly. Since she was not from this world, it was possible for her to help anyone. However, why did she become a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace? Xian Yin swept his gaze across as if he had seen through Tang Zheng's thoughts and directly said, Back then New Era was only able to build the Azure Dragon Palace with my help. Do you think there's a problem with me being a consecrator of the Azure Dragon Palace? You helped New Era build the Azure Dragon Palace? This was definitely explosive news. Everyone was shocked and at the same time they found it inconceivable. But without any doubt she asked. This was definitely not her bragging. A light flashed across Tang Zheng's eyes as he came to a realization. I understand. I have always been very suspicious about what kind of ability New Era had to be able to expel all the cultivators, but now I finally understand. He did not rely on his own strength. I'm afraid you are the key factor. Xian Yin looked at him with admiration and said, You are really smart. You can actually rely on fragmented information to completely understand the truth. Then why did you do it? Tang Zheng asked angrily, Do you know how cruel this is to our world and even to those cultivators? The reason why this world became a small world was closely related to the expulsion of cultivators. If there were cultivators, then this world would not have been demoted to a small world, and there would not have been any possibility of destruction. Xian Yin said coldly, This is not my world, why should I be merciful to this world? But what's in it for you? Tang Zheng was unwilling to give up. He would not give up until he got to the bottom of the matter. Xian Yin smiled coldly. Of course it's beneficial to me, but it's even more beneficial to my world. How can you guess the mysteries behind it? Then where exactly are you from? Seeing that the other party was deliberately mystifying, Tang Zheng asked again. The other world, which is what you call the heavens beyond heaven, Xian Yin said proudly. She was obviously very proud of the world she lived in. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The realm beyond heaven was infamous. No one would have thought that someone from the realm beyond heaven would appear in this world. But now that Xian Yin had admitted it herself, everyone realized that the situation had become very complicated. Tang Zheng was anxious. This meant that the unknown creature was also from the sky beyond heaven. He gradually had a very bad premonition. He muttered to himself irresolutely, You said that doing this would bring great benefits to your world, and you purposely banished the other practitioners to the sky beyond heaven. Could this be your goal? You need those practitioners? Xian Yin was slightly startled. She said in surprise, You're really smart. Although I don't know you from your performance, you're definitely one of the best of the younger generation in this world. I don't need your praise. Tang Zheng said unhappily. I just want to know your ultimate goal. What will you do to those expelled practitioners? Also, what benefits will this bring to your world? Xianyin sneered. You want me to answer your questions? Impossible. Tang Jing flew into a rage. There are so many of us. Do you think you can escape? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll have no choice but to use the soul-searching book. Then all the answers will be easily solved. Humph, the only one here who can threaten me is her. Xianyin snorted disdainfully. She pointed at the Empyrean fairy and said confidently, but if she wants to stop me, it's impossible. Tang Jing glanced at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she didn't refute this, it meant that Xianyin was telling the truth. If she wanted to leave, no one here could stop her. A high elder of the Azure Dragon Palace actually turned the situation around. Tang Jing was very unwilling to accept this. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't gain anything. At least he now knew that the Azure Dragon Palace could do such a shocking thing with the help of Xianyin from the sky beyond sky. But this was all history. What was more important was Xianyin's purpose for doing all this. What was this unspeakable purpose? Would it still threaten this world? This was what Tang Jing was most concerned about. The Empyrean fairy was silent for a while. Then she stepped forward and closed the distance between her and Xianyin. Her red lips moved slightly. Xianyin, if you leave alone, I may not be able to do anything. But you're bringing a burden with you. Do you think you have an absolute chance of winning? Of course, this burden was referring to the Great Lord. When the Great Lord heard this, his face under the mask turned red. Even his neck turned red. His eyes were burning with anger, but he was also helpless. With the Empyrean fairy's strength, she was indeed qualified to say this. He couldn't refute it at all. Tang Jing keenly sensed the Great Lord's embarrassment. He laughed mockingly. Great Lord, you've always been hiding behind the mask and not showing your true face. You're like a rat hiding in the sewers. You can only watch from the shadows and live forever in the dark corners. The Great Lord was ridiculed by the Empyrean fairy. He couldn't refute, but when he heard Tang Jing's sarcastic words, he was furious. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins popped out. He couldn't wait to pounce on Tang Jing and kill him. Tang Jing naturally understood his thoughts, so he deliberately said these words to provoke him so that he would lose his mind and take off the mask. He was very curious about the face under the mask. The Great Lord took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He looked meaningfully at Tang Jing and said, "You're really a smart person. You actually want to use this kind of method to provoke me. Unfortunately, I've long passed that age. How could I fall for your trick?" Tang Jing secretly sighed. His plan had failed. The Great Lord was after all the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. He had too many outstanding aspects. This kind of small trick was indeed difficult to use. The Great Lord looked at Tang Jing and the others with ridicule. "I won't drag down Sir Consecrator. Besides, do you really think that you can defeat my Azure Dragon Hall just by destroying this place? Wishful thinking. If the Azure Dragon Hall was really so easily defeated, then it would have vanished into thin air for hundreds of years." Tang Jing suddenly said, "It's said that the Azure Dragon Hall has a lot of people, but this time I only saw a few people. Where did the others go?" "Haha, you finally learned to be smart and asked a crucial question. But why should I tell you?" The Great Lord laughed sinisterly. "All the answers will naturally be revealed once I capture you. You don't have that ability." The Great Lord retorted, subconsciously hiding behind Xianyin. A dignified Great Lord of a generation hiding behind a woman. If news of this got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? The Great Lord of course knew that this kind of influence was extremely bad, but in order to save his life, he decided to ignore it. Kill. Suddenly, a sharp voice came from the Empyrean fairy's throat. Her figure flashed as she attacked Xianyin. Ever since the Empyrean fairy had awakened, this was the first time her killing intent had been aroused. Even when she faced the Hundred Faces Star-Lord, she didn't have such a strong killing intent. That was because she felt a strong sense of danger from Xianyin's words. This wasn't just for her but for the entire world. In the face of external aggression, the Empyrean fairy subconsciously regarded herself as the master of this world. Precisely because of this, she was especially angry at the Azure Dragon Hall who colluded with Xianyin. She swept a glance at the Great Lord, full of intense killing intent. It was as sharp as a knife, causing the Great Lord to subconsciously avoid her gaze. The Empyrean fairy's attack was like a thunderbolt, powerful and powerful. The stately painting suddenly expanded like a curtain, covering the sky and covering everyone's heads. It was dark. The only thing that could be seen was the painting. The mountains and lakes on the painting became lifelike and rapidly expanded, as if they were identical to the real thing. A boundless power was emitted from the stately painting. This time there were no mountains, no torrents, no wind and no rain, but the feeling it gave off was even more oppressive and terrifying. This power was formless yet pervasive. Everyone present could feel it. As long as one was under the stately painting that covered the sky, no one could escape. However, the two groups of people felt completely different. Tang Zheng and the others didn't feel too uncomfortable. Although they felt the power of this power, it didn't attack them. Xianyin and the Great Lord felt completely different. The power attacked them from all directions, from top to bottom, from front to back, from left to right. The look in their eyes changed. This was a killing move, completely incomparable to the previous attack. Xianyin gritted her teeth and asked, "What kind of power is this?" "The primordial power." The Empyrean fairy squeezed these 4 words out of her teeth. Her expression was unprecedentedly focused and dignified. The primitive force was a force hidden in the map of mountains and rivers of the gods and Vale. This magic treasure was refined by a supreme master in ancient times. It encompassed the heavens and earth, mountains and rivers, and was almost identical to the real world. However, the root of all this was the primordial power. It was a mysterious power that existed between heaven and earth. Ordinary people couldn't see it at all, let alone extract it and use it as a means of attack. However, the Supreme Master did it. This gave the stately painting great power. However, it was not easy to activate the primordial power in the stately painting. It consumed a lot of power, and it also required the caster's strength. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, she would never use it easily. Just like in the previous dangerous battle, she didn't activate the primordial power. At this moment she was really angry. She was angry at Xianyin and the Great Lord, so she didn't hesitate to use this killing move to inflict serious damage on them. Chapter 939. Xianyin was from the outland, so she did not know much about the Chaos Force. However, this did not stop her from seeing how powerful this force was. Therefore, Xianyin and the Lord felt threatened at the same time, and both of them used everything they had. Asterisk ring ring ring. Asterisk a series of sounds came from the bell in Xianyin's hand. The bell glowed with a bronze-yellow light and intertwined around her body. Gradually, it formed a huge bell that enveloped her. The sound of the bell became louder and louder. The light became thicker and thicker. It was as if a huge bell was protecting her. The Lord did not have divine powers like Xianyin. He stabbed the sword in his hand. Rays of sword light intertwined and floated above his head. Asterisk boom boom. Asterisk the chaos force finally fell. The rocks on the cliff shattered and fell to the ground, turning into dust. The bell formed by the light trembled. The sound of the bell became louder and louder. It was resisting the chaos force. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the sword light above the Lord's head did not hold on for long. It collapsed like a piece of rotten wood. Asterisk. Asterisk he spat out a mouthful of blood. The rocks under his feet shattered and he fell down the cliff. Seeing this, Xianyin roared, "Break!" The light of the bell shone brightly and the sound became like thunder. Asterisk crack. Asterisk a crack appeared on the bell. A beam of yellow light shot into the sky from the opening and collided with the painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of Vale. The mountain river map shook violently and the chaos force was greatly reduced. The Empyrean fairy's eyes turned cold. She quickly channeled her inner energy. Asterisk. Asterisk Xianyin spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face turned pale. The crack on the bell grew bigger and the light dimmed. At the same time, the chaos force weakened. The Empyrean fairy felt as if her energy had been sucked out of her body. Most of the vital energy in her body was depleted. She became a little sluggish. Xianyin took this opportunity to fly down. She grabbed the Lord who was falling at a high speed. Holding the broken bell in one hand, she fell down the cliff. The Empyrean fairy had won this battle. Although she had used up a lot of vital energy, she was not injured. In order to save the High Lord, Xianyin did not hesitate to forcefully activate her magic treasure. In the end, her magic treasure was damaged and she was injured and vomited blood. When Tang Jing saw that the Empyrean fairy was on the verge of collapsing, he immediately rushed over to support her. With her soft body in his arms, he didn't have a trace of lust and asked with concern, "How are you?" The Empyrean fairy shook her head and said, "Chase after them quickly. If we let them escape this time, it won't be so easy to find them again." "Tian Chanzi, go after him," Tang Jing shouted. One should not pursue a cornered enemy. However, this group of people were not cornered enemies but ferocious tigers. Once the tigers returned to the mountains, there would be no end of trouble. Tian Chanzi dived down the cliff while Tang Jing helped Empyrean Fairy to the top of the mountain. He handed her over to Wu Junshan and the others and asked them to take good care of her. "You have to be careful too. Seeing that Tang Zheng was about to chase after them, they hurriedly warned him. The scene just now had really taught them a vivid lesson. This was the strength of the strong practitioners. Their fighting strength was indeed extraordinary. They were far from being able to compare with them. In fact, they couldn't even compare with their own son. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu were deeply moved. Looking at the figure chasing down the cliff, the two of them anxiously looked at each other. There were too many inexplicable feelings in their eyes. Tang Zheng and Tian Chanzi flew to the bottom of the cliff one after another. From afar they saw the figures of Xianyin and the High Lord. The High Lord did not know how to fly, so he seriously dragged Xianyin down. He was caught by Xianyin and fell down awkwardly. "Stop!" Tian Chanzi roared and chopped down with the sword in his hand. From the top to the bottom, the power was terrifying. Xianyin looked up and happened to see that the sword light was about to fall on her head. Her expression darkened as she shook the broken bell. In an instant, a yellow light soared into the sky from the bell. This yellow light was much weaker than before. Its power was sharply reduced, but it met the sword light head-on. Boom! The two lights collided and exploded. The sky became incomparably gorgeous. The cliff was hit by the light and rocks flew everywhere. A large part of it collapsed. The two of them were actually evenly matched in this exchange. Everyone was shocked. Shen Yin's face became more and more gloomy. The High Lord couldn't help but twitch his mouth. In an instant, the Empyrean fairy had turned the situation around. The High Lord was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing he could do. Tian Chanzi and Tang Zheng were overjoyed. They originally thought that Xian Yin was more powerful, but it seemed that they had overestimated her. Her injuries were not light, and her strength had been greatly reduced. Unexpectedly, she was almost on par with Tian Chanzi. Tang Zheng calmed down and said in a low voice, "Tian Chanzi, this is a rare opportunity. Fu Yao is no longer able to fight against her. It's up to us now." Tian Chanzi nodded happily. "You're right. We have to use all our strength to keep them here." After saying that, he increased his speed and was already behind Xianyin. Xianyin waved her delicate hand, and the bell flew to her head. It kept shaking and the demonic sound entered people's ears, causing their minds to sway. Tian Chanzi's face darkened and he actually stopped. This demonic sound was very different from before. It was indeed powerful, causing people's minds to sway and almost lose their minds. It was precisely this short delay that allowed Xianyin and Tian Chanzi to pull apart the distance between them. They could see the bottom of the cliff very clearly. The lush forest was dark. If they fell into it, it would be easier for them to hide and escape. Tang Zheng was extremely anxious. He did not care about Tian Chanzi's absent-mindedness, and chased after them. In an instant he closed the distance between him and Xianyin. Holding the heaven-shocking bow in his hand, the shooting sun arrow slid past his fingertips and shot towards them with a shocking sound. Insignificant skill. Xianyin snorted in disdain. Although her strength had temporarily decreased, she still did not put Tang Zheng in her eyes. She did not even bother to use a magic treasure. She pointed her finger in the air, and a vast and mighty power surged out. The shooting sun arrow instantly stopped in midair. It was forcibly blocked by this force. But before Xianyin could be happy, he realized that Tang Zheng's figure was actually right in front of him. This person is really not afraid of death. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. The bell shone brightly, releasing a soul-stirring power, and the ringing sound enveloped Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's eyes became sluggish for a moment, then he regained his senses and burst out with a burst of shock. He felt that there was something strange in his mind, but after circulating his innate qi, he regained his composure. He finally understood one of the powerful aspects of Xianyin. She not only attacked the physical body but also the mind. That bronze-yellow light attacked the physical body, while Ding Ling Ling's demonic sound attacked the mind. The most terrifying thing was that this demonic sound was all-pervasive, making it impossible for people to guard against it. He also finally understood why Tian Chanzi was absent-minded earlier. It turned out that it was the influence of the demonic sound. But why didn't he have much of a reaction? He guessed that it was because he did not have the inner demons. Just as this thought appeared, the voice of the inner demons rang out. "Young man, you're right, this woman's bell can indeed attack a person's mind. But it's too child's play, it can't be compared to mine." Chiyu scoffed and said, "You're pushing yourself to the top. This woman is not simple. Visitors from the sky beyond heaven have never appeared in our time. Perhaps they have discovered our world, so they sent people to explore it, just like how we sent people to explore the sky beyond heaven. Their goal is obviously more aggressive than ours. Otherwise, Why would she use tricks to expel all the cultivators to the sky beyond heaven? The inner demons retorted. That's natural. Qiyu did not object. Then do you know what their goal is? Do you know? The inner demons asked. I don't know for now, but as long as we catch her, we will know. Tang Jing's heart moved and he hurriedly asked, do you have a way to catch her? Of course. Qiyu was full of confidence. The inner demons disdainfully said, no matter how strong you are, this woman's attack is a mental attack. Your methods may not work. Who said they're useless? Qiyu said unconvinced. Then let's have a competition and see whose methods are more useful. The inner demons argued. Let's have a competition who's afraid of who. We'll each use our own methods and see whose methods are more effective. Qiyu said angrily, Tang Jing, I'll teach you a set of leg techniques. This is my own creation called the heaven-splitting leg. What heaven-splitting leg? Such a flashy name, it's definitely not much. The inner demon scoffed, Tang Jing, I'll teach you a mental attack technique called the mind manipulation technique. Tang Jing was secretly delighted. As the saying goes, when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Qiyu and the inner demons did not see eye to eye and fought each other, which benefited him. These two were not ordinary people, and the techniques that leaked out from under their fingernails were not common either. Time is of the essence, hurry up and tell me what to do. Tang Jing purposely urged. I'll tell you. Why don't you evaluate who's stronger? In a split second, 2 streaks of light appeared in Tang Jing's mind, and 2 sets of cultivation techniques immediately appeared in his mind. He was ecstatic. These 2 sets of cultivation techniques were definitely very powerful. Although he had only taken a rough look, he was already shocked by these 2 sets of cultivation techniques. The heaven-splitting leg was a perfect set of leg techniques. It focused on mobilizing the strength of the legs and strengthening the strength of the legs. Tang Jing had already cultivated the chaotic Vajra spell, and his entire body was as tough as steel, so the heaven-splitting technique was twice the result with half the effort. When his mind moved, an image appeared in his mind, and one move after another automatically evolved. This set of leg techniques was actually a quick method. In just a blink of an eye, he had learned everything. This set of leg techniques was extremely simple, but it was extremely exquisite and overbearing. There were a total of 5 moves, which were sweeping away 1,000 soldiers, stepping on mountains, divine dragon tail, heavenly blade revolution, and splitting the heavens and earth. This set of leg techniques would automatically increase in power as one's cultivation increased, but it also had an extremely high requirement for the cultivator's physical fitness. Not only did it have an extremely high requirement for the toughness of the legs, it also had an extremely high requirement for the control and flexibility of the body. Chapter 940. Tang Jing immediately shifted his attention to mind manipulation. Mind manipulation focused on mental attacks, which was the same as the demonic sound of the bell, but had many differences. Mind manipulation didn't require the help of an external medium. With a very short incantation and the corresponding mental cultivation method, everything would flow naturally. With a single thought, everything about mind manipulation was deeply imprinted in his mind, and the speed of learning was no less than that of heaven-splitting kick. Tang Jing had never practiced a mental attack technique, which was very rare in this world. Even the Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi didn't know how to use it. Therefore, compared to heaven-splitting kick, he was more interested in the inner demon's mind manipulation. Seeing that Xian Yin and the High Lord were very close to the treetops at the bottom of the cliff, Tang Jing grabbed the shooting sun arrows that were colliding with the copper-yellow light and chased after them. At this time, Tian Chanzi also caught up and said indignantly, "This woman is really powerful. She even used a mental attack technique. I almost fell into her trap." Mental attacks hurt people invisibly. Even if it couldn't kill the opponent, it was enough to make the opponent fall into an illusion. It was more difficult to guard against than other physical attacks. "I'll deal with her," Tang Jing volunteered. Heaven Monk looked at him in disbelief and said, "Can you do it?" "Tisich, how can a man say no?" Tang Jing smiled evilly and directly chased after the two. Tian Chanzi looked at him deeply and muttered, "This kid always surprises me. Don't you know that this is a scare? I can't do anything but you are so confident. Isn't this a blow to me?" Tian Chanzi wanted to cry but had no tears. However, he didn't stand by and watch. Whether Tang Jing was bragging or not, at least he would join the battle. Whoosh! The air was pierced with a sharp sound. Xian Yin's heart trembled. She looked up and saw 3 shooting sun arrows flying at her at high speed. Xian Yin felt bad. She had consumed a lot of energy. At first she didn't take the shooting sun arrows seriously. However, the simple exchange just now gave him a new understanding of the power of the shooting sun arrows. The shooting sun arrows were definitely not as simple as she thought. This time the 3 arrows were fired simultaneously, and the power was even greater. She threw the Great Lord down and said, "You go first, I'll catch up later." The High Lord's speed suddenly increased, and then he steadily landed on the treetops. Without any hesitation, he jumped into the dense forest and disappeared without a trace. Damn it, the High Lord actually escaped. Tang Jing cried out in alarm, but he was too far away. He could only watch as the Great Lord disappeared into the woods. Since the High Lord was nowhere to be seen, all the more reason he couldn't let Xianyin go. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to gain much from this trip. His gaze locked onto Xianyin as he leaped towards her. Xianyin took out her little bell, causing it to fly up and float above her head, emitting a bronze-yellow light. 3 copper-yellow rays of light shot out from the bell, and met the 3 shooting sun arrows head-on. A dazzling light burst out in midair. The attack of the shooting sun arrows was neutralized, and the light also disappeared. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Tang Jing casually put away the shooting sun arrows that were at the end of their flight into his bag, and then stomped down. Step on the mountain. This was one of the moves of the heaven-splitting leg technique. In that instant, Tang Jing's entire center of gravity sank, and his legs glowed with a golden luster. This was the effect of the chaotic Vajra spell. He suddenly descended. His feet seemed to possess boundless power, enough to crush mountains. Moreover, the momentum of his descent was very compatible with this move, making it even more powerful. Bang! Xianyin did not dodge. Instead, she relied on her slender hands to meet the enemy. She raised her hand above her head, and Tang Jing's foot just happened to land on her palm. Time and space seemed to have been frozen. In their eyes, there was only each other, and sparks seemed to be flying. Under that attack, a shockwave spread out in all directions from the point where the hands and feet collided. Tang Jing's momentum was stopped, but he did not stop his attack. Instead, he used the heavenly blade revolution. Whiz! With a sweep of his long leg, it was like a long spear sweeping toward Xianyin's head. A cold light flashed in Xianyin's eyes. She naturally saw the power of this leg technique and reprimanded, "What kind of leg technique is this?" "Heaven-splitting leg," Tang Jing said indifferently as he increased the strength of his leg to the limit. Xianyin immediately raised her hands to block, grabbing onto one of Tang Jing's legs, but the huge force caused her to take a step back. "Heaven-splitting leg? That's quite a big name," Xianyin said sternly. Using all the strength in his hands, Tang Jing's leg that was being grabbed was about to break. Tang Jing immediately activated the chaotic Vajra spell, and immediately, a golden luster appeared on his legs. Xianyin suddenly used all her strength, but she was still unable to injure her muscles and bones. She exclaimed in surprise as if she was surprised by the strength of Tang Jing's defense. Tang Jing still had some lingering fear, but he would not give her a second chance to use her strength. Although he was very confident in his chaotic Vajra spell, his opponent was an expert of the semi-god realm after all, so he did not dare to take the risk. Thus, with a move that could sweep away 1,000 armies, Tang Jing's other leg swept towards Xianyin's neck. A gust of wind blew over and she felt a chill on her neck, causing her expression to change slightly. This set of leg techniques seemed simple, but in reality, it had anticipated many situations in actual combat. It seemed ordinary, but in reality, it was ever-changing. There was a saying that no matter how many changes there were, it was still the same. This set of leg techniques was a typical example of this. The simple leg technique included many combinations and changes. A series of attacks made people unable to defend against it. Tang Jing also gradually understood this point, and couldn't help but look at Qiyu in a new light. As expected of the leg technique created by Qiyu, there were many places where Qiyu's shadow could be seen. This set of leg techniques was particular about being fierce and domineering. It was of the same origin as Qiyu, and it was also suitable for Tang Jing's style. Under the sweeping of 1,000 armies, Xianyin had no choice but to let go of Tang Jing and subconsciously retreat. Tang Jing escaped, but he did not retreat. His body leaned back and with a forward somersault he struck down with one leg towards Xianyin. Divine Dragon Tail Swing. At this moment, his leg was like the tail of a divine dragon, fiercely swinging down with a heart-palpitating power. At the same time, the dragon chi and dragon might in his body automatically mobilized. Pop! The air exploded like a firecracker. The power of this kick was even greater than Tang Jing had expected. At Tang Jing, the dragon god technique you cultivate is actually very compatible with this divine dragon tail swing, so it automatically mobilized your dragon chi and dragon might. The inner demons was surprised. Chiyu said proudly, "Now you know how powerful I am. The cultivation technique I created is definitely not a small matter." The inner demons snorted but did not refute. From his point of view, Chiyu did not seem to be bragging. Tang Jing was secretly delighted. He silently circulated the dragon god technique. The power of this move was not yet exhausted, and it was even more powerful. Xianyin narrowed her eyes slightly. If she was at her peak, she would not be afraid of these leg techniques. But now that she was seriously injured, it would not be so easy. Moreover, her opponent did not necessarily want to kill her. He only wanted to capture her. Moreover, as long as he could stall for time and wait for the Empyrean fairy to recover, she would have nowhere to run. In fact, Tang Jing understood this, so he did not want to kill her. That was a fool's dream. Xianyin gritted her teeth. She had never thought that she would encounter such a defeat. She was forced into such a sorry state by a first-grade Yuanying. Moreover, this set of leg techniques was very strange and powerful. It was not something that someone of his cultivation level should possess. She did not have time to think about it. She hurriedly circulated her energy, causing the bell to emit thousands of rays of light. The sound of the bell became even louder. The demonic sound entered his ears, and there was no sound anywhere else. It was completely poured into Tang Jing's ears. Xianyin had already realized that Tang Jing's mind was firm. Ordinary spiritual attacks would not be effective. Therefore, she accumulated all the demonic sound in order to give him a fatal blow. If it was before, even if Tang Jing did not have the inner demons, he would still be greatly affected. But now that Tang Jing had learned the mind manipulation technique, he was able to comprehend spiritual attacks by analogy. As soon as the demonic sound entered his ears, he immediately activated the mind manipulation technique. Since the mind manipulation technique could take the hearts of others, it could naturally avoid such attacks. The inner demons were great at spiritual attacks. Compared to them, Xianyin was still 10 streets away. Even if the inner demons revealed a little bit of their techniques, it was absolutely not to be underestimated. Xianyin was originally waiting for Tang Jing to lose his mind so that she could quickly escape into the woods and disappear. But she saw the corner of Tang Jing's mouth curl up into a faint smile. Her heart trembled. She cried out in alarm. Bang! The divine dragon swings its tail directly shattered the light on the bell. With a cracking sound, another crack appeared on the bell. Ah! Xianyin was shocked. The bell was a sacred tool. Its power had been greatly reduced because of the previous crack. This time, a part of it was actually destroyed by the divine dragon swings its tail, forcibly creating a crack. Tang Jing also did not expect this. The power of the divine dragon swings its tail was much greater than the original because of the effect of the divine dragon arts. Seeing Xianyin turn pale with fright, Tang Jing moved his lips and chanted an incantation. At the same time, he activated the mind manipulation technique. An invisible force enveloped Xianyin. After all, she was an expert in spiritual attacks. She immediately reacted, her eyes releasing a terrifying light. "You also know how to use spiritual attacks?" Xianyin's voice became sharp. Previously, she only felt that Tang Jing was a little extraordinary. But now, she knew that he was the most troublesome person she had ever met. There were very few people in the world who were good at using spiritual attacks. She was only able to cultivate spiritual attacks because of a chance encounter. It was precisely because of this that she was chosen to come to this world with a mission. Spiritual attacks were not only used to attack others, but more importantly, they could also affect others. This was a realm that many other physical attack experts could not reach. When she arrived in a new world and faced an unfamiliar environment, the spiritual attack technique was very useful. Moreover, she also shouldered an even more important mission. Influencing others would be twice the result with half the effort. Nuera was influenced by her, and then attacked the center of Wuxia from the wilderness outside the pass. In the end, she expelled the cultivators and completed her mission. Furthermore, Nuera established a new dynasty. If not for her appearance or bewitchment, none of this would have happened. This world would have entered a new world. Therefore, she was the one who affected this world. Facing the attack of the mind manipulation technique, Xianyin's mind almost lost control. Although her cultivation was high in terms of spiritual attacks, she was far from being as high as her own cultivation. Chapter 941. Xianyin hurriedly activated the bell and enveloped herself in light in an attempt to defend herself against the mind control technique. However, she still failed. She felt as if her mind was in a trance and she was about to lose control. She was very clear about the serious consequences of losing control. It was very likely that Tang Zheng would control her mind and she would become a puppet. This was something that she had done to others before. She did not want it to happen to her even in her dreams. Tang Zheng did not expect the mind control technique to succeed and control her. Thus, he took advantage of the moment when she was distracted to raise his leg. Heaven-splitting earth. This was the most powerful technique in the heaven-splitting leg technique. In an instant, the aura of heaven and earth was stirred up by this attack. Tang Zheng's leg seemed to possess such great power. It broke through the air and rapidly descended. With a loud bang, Tang Zheng's leg struck the bronze-yellow light. With a crack, the light shattered. However, this attack did not use up all of its strength and still landed on Xian Yin's shoulder. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her mind became more and more dispirited and unstable. Tang Zheng's will was like a sword and was about to drill into Xian Yin's mind. Xian Yin's heart trembled. However, she knew that at this critical moment, even if her cultivation level was much higher than Tang Zheng's, if she could not resist, she would become a puppet and would never be able to rise again. She unwillingly widened her eyes and stared at Tang Zheng, not bothering to hide the raging anger in her eyes. Tang Zheng was delighted. He knew that he was about to succeed. This mind control technique was indeed powerful. Of course, if not for the heaven-splitting leg technique, he would not have succeeded so quickly. This set of leg techniques was not inferior to the flying immortal sword technique in close combat. There was no need to rely on magical weapons. It was all based on one's own strength. It had indeed benefited Tang Zheng a lot. Suddenly his pupils shrank. He looked at Xian Yin in disbelief. This was because a mist rose from Xian Yin's body and enveloped her whole body. Tang Zheng found that his consciousness could not penetrate the mist and the mind control technique had lost its effect. He roared angrily. Was he going to fail at the last minute and let her escape this calamity? He was not willing to give up just like that. Another leg flew up, and a divine dragon swings its tail attack was launched. Bang! A huge repulsive force bounced back from the fog. His leg did not penetrate the fog and the repulsive force made his leg bones ache. He immediately realized that something was wrong, but it was too late, because the fog quickly condensed and turned into a crystal. She was sealed by the crystal again. Looking at this scene, Tang Zheng was shocked speechless. Except for Tian Chanzi and him, the others had not seen Xian Yin's previous situation, but seeing this change they were also shocked. Tang Zheng's shock was even more intense, because he knew that Xian Yin had been hiding in the crystal at first, but he didn't expect that she could actually control it as she pleased. Not only did she allow him to escape from the crystal, she could also seal him inside again. Tang Zheng's mind control technique could not penetrate the crystal to attack her, and the energy contained in the crystal was so strong that even a physical attack could not hurt her. Tang Zheng was not willing to give up, and with a flying knife, he kicked the crystal. The crystal fell down quickly but it was not damaged at all. Tang Zheng sighed and quickly caught up with the crystal. Holding it in his hand, the crystal gradually turned from transparent to blurry. Xian Yin's eyes were filled with unwillingness and anger as she stared at him, leaving a deep impression in his mind. At this moment, Tian Chanzi came out of the forest. Just now, he saw that Tang Zheng had completely taken the initiative, so he directly rushed into the forest to chase after the High Lord. However, the forest was too dense, and this was an unfamiliar environment, so he did not chase after the High Lord and returned empty-handed. He glanced at the crystal in Tang Zheng's hand and said in surprise, "What's going on? Where's Xian Yin?" Tang Zheng pointed at the crystal and said, "She's in there. She sealed herself in there and we have no way to break it." Tian Chanzi still remembered the strength of the crystal and waved his fist in annoyance. This woman is really cunning. Previously when he was being chased by Xian Yin in the cave he was in a very sorry state which made him suffer a lot. When he saw that Tang Zheng had the upper hand he thought that he could capture the other party, but he did not expect that she actually had a trick up her sleeve. Now no one could do anything to her so they could only stare at the crystal helplessly. Tian Chanzi looked deeply at Tang Zheng and said, "How did you do all this?" Tang Zheng laughed. "A hermit has his own clever plan." Then he jumped and flew back to the top of the cliff. The others had been watching them without blinking so they had clearly seen the battle between Tang Zheng and Xian Yin. They had also seen Xian Yin's strange methods so they all had complicated expressions. This was especially true for the Empyrean fairy, who frowned because she had never seen such a situation before. "Is there no way to get her out?" the Empyrean fairy asked curiously. Tang Zheng spread his hands. "I don't have a way but you can try." Okay, then I'll try. The Empyrean fairy clenched her fist and threw a punch at the crystal. Boom. A muffled sound rang out. Fortunately, Tang Zheng had firmly held onto the crystal, otherwise it would have been sent flying. The crystal was still intact. The Empyrean fairy's expression dimmed. She was very clear on the strength of her punch. Since it did not cause any damage to the crystal, it was enough to show how powerful it was. Wu Junshan asked with a complicated expression, "Then is there really no way?" He was a martial artist, so he could not think of a better plan, but he could not help but frown when he saw that everyone was in trouble. It's not that there is no way, but it will take a lot of time. It's not something that can be done in a short period of time. Tang Jing muttered. It's good that there is a way. What is it? Lan Yu was delighted to hear this and asked. Tang Zheng looked at the couple and said, "This crystal is a body of energy. As long as we absorb all of its energy, Xianyin will naturally be able to see the light of day again. Then we will have a chance to deal with her." The Empyrean fairy and Tian Chanzi did not object, because this was the best way. However, the most important point was that Xianyin could take the initiative to melt the crystal and escape. If she brought it back to the island like the previous crystal, then it would be a disaster. Once she escaped, the people on the island would become living targets. No one would be her opponent. Tang Zheng had an idea and suggested, "Why don't I put her into Sumeru Heavens? That way she won't be able to escape from me." Sumeru Heavens was Tang Zheng's territory. He had the final say. Anyone who entered it would not be able to escape. In addition, he could absorb the crystal's energy at any time and place. Over time, his cultivation would increase greatly. Even if she escaped in the future, he would not have to worry. The Empyrean fairy guessed Tang Zheng's thoughts and nodded in agreement after thinking for a while. This method is feasible, but you must remember that she is very important. She is related to the conspiracy of the realm beyond heaven. Understood. This is the most important thing. Tang Zheng nodded in agreement. The purpose of the other world was definitely not simple. If they did not figure it out, it would be a hidden danger. As for what happened to the cultivators who were expelled, it was also very important to know what happened to them. It was a pity that they did not have anyone from the realm beyond heaven by their side. The demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven had all died in a series of battles. No one could answer this question. I should have captured a few demons who returned from the realm beyond heaven. That way, I would have been able to find out what the realm beyond heaven is all about. Tang Jing sighed regretfully. There is no medicine for regret in this world. Besides, time will give us the answer. The Empyrean fairy did not mind. Tang Jing smiled. At this moment, Qi Yu and the inner demons were locked in a fierce argument. Both of them wanted to take the credit for themselves. They both said that it was because of him that they were able to capture Xianyin. They were in a deadlock. Tang Jing, you be the judge. Qi Yu said angrily. The inner demons also said, "That's right, young man. You be the judge." Was it because of my mind manipulation that Xianyin had no choice but to give up and seal herself in the end? It was clearly my heaven-splitter leg's continuous attacks that exhausted her. Even without your mind-absorbing technique, Tang Zheng could have easily captured her. Who needs your help? Qi Yu retorted. Tang Zheng helplessly shouted in his mind, "Stop. This time both of you contributed. It was because of both of you that I was able to capture Xianyin." Young man, you can't say that. There is always a question of how much credit one has contributed. Who do you think contributed the most? The inner demons did not give up and asked. Qi Yu also said, "That's right. Who contributed the most? Say it so that some people will understand their own abilities." Tang Jing suddenly had an idea. There was no doubt that this time he had gained a big advantage. If it wasn't for Xianyin, these two would not have been able to use Qi to teach him the heaven-splitting kick and mind manipulation. They must have many other skills or things that would be useful to Tang Jing. If they were fair and there was no competition between the two, it would not be a good thing for him. This time he had tasted the sweetness of competition and felt that it was necessary to drive a wedge between the two. If they continued to fight, he might be able to take advantage of them next time. He gradually had a plan in his mind. After thinking for a while, he said, "The heaven-splitting kick was very useful. After all, with my cultivation I was able to suppress Xianyin. This is already incredible." Hearing this, Qi Yu laughed and said with satisfaction, "Inner demons, are you convinced now? My heaven-splitting kick is even more powerful." The inner demons snorted unhappily. But Tang Jing did not finish his words and continued to add, "But at the last moment, the mind manipulation played the most important role. If it wasn't for the mind manipulation with the influence of the other party's demonic bell sound, I would not have been able to gain any advantage. It would have been impossible to force her to seal herself. So in the end, the mind manipulation was more important and more effective. Chapter 942. Chiyu was stunned. He did not expect this to be the result. This was too much of a bully. He was indignant. Tang Zheng, why is this the result? Tang Zheng had already anticipated his reaction and calmly said, I am just speaking the truth. Chiyu was furious, but he could not refute. After all, his heart was still in Tang Zheng's hands. He angrily snorted and said, Inner demons, don't be so proud. The inner demons laughed. I am proud. What can you do to me? Changing the topic, he said to Tang Zheng, Young man, what you said is the truth. Haha, I find that I actually like you a little. Don't. Tang Zheng refused. I am not glass. What is glass? The inner demons were confused. Chiyu disdainfully said, You don't even know this. What a country bumpkin. Do you understand the benefits of being gay? Disgusting. The inner demons was furious. Tang Zheng was too lazy to pay attention to the two's argument, and directly put the crystal into Sumeru world. With a thought, the crystal's energy was continuously absorbed into his body from Sumeru world. This was just like absorbing air. He could absorb the energy of the crystals at any time and place, but he could not absorb too much at once. In other words, one could not become fat in one bite. He enjoyed this process very much. As for Sumeru world, the crystal became transparent, and Xian Yin's eyes were wide open, but there was nothing she could do. Tang Zheng subconsciously looked down the cliff and asked, Can you really not find the High Lord's whereabouts? Tian Chanzi shook his head. This person is very cunning. When I chased after him, I already lost track of him. Tang Zheng was helpless. All right, although it is a bit regretful, but this time the Azure Dragon Hall suffered a heavy blow, and also captured Xian Yin, so this trip was not in vain. Marshall suddenly interjected. The Azure Dragon Hall's people are already mostly dead, and this is only a heavy blow? Tang Zheng guessed what she was thinking and nodded. The Azure Dragon Hall's strength is not limited to this. We were too optimistic. Although we've gotten rid of Elder Angler and some flying guillotines, their true power hasn't been uprooted yet. Furthermore, the High Lord hasn't been caught yet, so he still has a chance to make a comeback. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu secretly nodded. They agreed with Tang Zheng's point of view. They had been in the martial organization for most of their lives, so they could clearly deduce the general strength of the Azure Dragon Palace. The strength of the Azure Dragon Palace was definitely not limited to this. Otherwise, how could it lead the martial organization, the Li Palace, and the Sword Pavilion? Moreover, they had only killed a few flying guillotines this time. The remnants of the Li Palace, the Sword Pavilion, and the martial sect had not appeared, so the strength of these people could not be underestimated. I already know the whereabouts of Li Palace and Sword Pavilion. Tang Zheng glanced at Li Xiaotian, who had not said a word since the beginning. This information was dug out from her mind. Since the High Lord has escaped, then let's make a trip to these two places. Tang Zheng said. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu's eyes lit up as they cheerfully applauded. They were relatively familiar with the Li Palace, but they were very curious about the Sword Pavilion. This was because the Sword God was powerful and his actions were secretive, so the martial organization did not have much contact with him. The others naturally did not have any objections and walked down the mountain. Seeing Li Xiaotian remain silent, Tang Zheng asked with concern, Are you all right? Li Xiaotian took a deep breath and raised her head. She squeezed out a smile, but it was very bitter. I'm fine. Tang Zheng nodded and said, Don't think about the past. Put your thoughts on the future. People can't choose the past, but they can choose the future. Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up and she nodded, I understand. Thank you. Tang Zheng did not try to persuade her any further. The group quickly descended the mountain and headed towards their next destination. The Sword Pavilion was located on a dangerous peak. The precipitous cliffs were like a sword piercing the heavens. The Sword Pavilion had a total of 300 sword slaves, and the core of the Sword Pavilion was the Sword Hut. It was said that the Sword God had comprehended sword techniques in the Sword Furnace and finally reached great success. The Sword Pavilion was rarely visited by people. The highest peak in a chain of undulating mountain peaks was called the Divine Sword Peak. The steep and bumpy mountain forest seemed to have become flat ground under their feet. They were many times faster than ordinary people. They were unimpeded and arrived at the undulating mountain peaks outside the Sword Pavilion. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy raised her hand and everyone subconsciously stopped. There's an ambush? The Empyrean fairy said in a deep voice. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted. The sword slaves of the Sword Pavilion should not be so close to the outside. They should be closer to the inside. However, the Empyrean fairy would never make a mistake, so he warned, "Everyone be careful. Li Xiaotian, stay behind me. I will protect you." Li Xiaotian had powerful martial arts, but she didn't know how to use them. Therefore Tang Jing had no choice but to protect her. After this journey, Li Xiaotian's mood had stabilized, and he obediently followed behind Tang Jing. Go! They took a few steps forward. Suddenly, whoosh, whoosh, streaks of sword light seemed to emerge from the ground as they strangled the group of people. The Empyrean fairy was walking at the front, but she was indifferent. These sword lights could not hurt her at all. Just as they were about to get close to her, an invisible force vibrated from her body, and the sword lights shattered. At the same time, Tian Chanzi also acted. The long sword in his hand trembled, and sword lights scattered all over the sky, accurately intercepting those sword lights. In an instant, all of the attacks collapsed as if they had never appeared. This scene shocked the sword slaves hiding in the dark, and their breathing involuntarily quickened. Tian Chanzi's gaze turned, and he immediately locked onto the position of the sword slaves, and lightly slashed out with his sword. The sword chi was like a rainbow. The sword slaves were stunned. They had only seen this kind of powerful sword technique from their master, the sword god. Who were these people and why were they so powerful? But there was no time to think, and they subconsciously raised their swords to block. Crack! The long sword broke. They could only watch as the sword chi entered their foreheads. A line of blood bloomed, and their vitality was cut off as they fell to the ground, dead. Tang Jing knit his brows as he looked at the sword slaves and doubtfully said, "The sword slaves shouldn't be placed in such an outer area. They seem to have expanded the defensive circle." He had learned from Li Xiaotian's brain that the sword pavilion's defensive formation was very different from what he saw now. It seems like Song Yu did something, and changed the sword pavilion's defensive formation. Martial's anger towards Song Yu had never decreased. Back then in the Imperial City, everyone had almost died in the explosion that he had detonated. This enmity was deep in his bones and he would never forget it. Thus, Martial angrily said, "He definitely knows that we are not dead, so he is guarding against our revenge." Tang Jing laughed in disdain, "So what if he is guarding against it? These defenses will not change the outcome." Tian Chanzi urged, "Then let's hurry up and destroy the sword pavilion, then we can go to the Li Palace." The few of them continued forward, and not long after they met the second group of sword slaves. However, this time the number of sword slaves and their resistance were clearly stronger. It was precisely because of this that they believed that their actions had been exposed, so they immediately rushed towards the steep divine sword peak as fast as lightning. The few of them quickly cut through the chaos, and without any obstruction, they arrived at the foot of the divine sword peak. Everyone soared into the air, and with the tip of their feet on the cliff, they did not take the normal path, and directly rushed towards the top of the divine sword peak. Tang Jing held onto Li Xiaotian's hand. She was extremely nervous, and her palms were covered in sweat. Whiz! A sword flew over from the top of the mountain, and directly shot towards Tang Jing. With a thought, there was no need for him to make a move. The War Soul sword appeared out of thin air and welcomed the sword. Clang! A spark flickered, and the sword broke into two, but the War Soul sword was still intact. Everyone had already flown halfway up the mountain, and were about to reach the top of the divine sword peak. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out, and 36 sword beams flew over from the top of the mountain, surrounding everyone. "This is a sword formation, everyone be careful." Tian Chanzi immediately saw through the profoundness of the formation, and reminded everyone. Everyone braced themselves as the 36 swords were about to arrive. The 36 swords seemed to have eyes, and automatically split into several parts, each attacking their opponent, but at the same time responding to each other. Tang Jing was shocked. This sword formation was not simple, as expected of the sword pavilion. They had their own unique understanding of the way of the sword, and they also understood the essence of it. Without a doubt, the existing warriors in the sword pavilion were unable to control their swords from a distance, but they could use the sword formation to achieve a similar effect. But looking at the 36 swords that were moving freely, Tang Jing remained calm and composed. Seeing a few swords flying over, he waved his War Soul sword, and with a clang, sparks flew, all of them slashing onto the swords. However, he felt a huge rebound force being transmitted from the War Soul sword to his palm. Furthermore, with one strike, the War Soul sword was not able to break the seemingly ordinary sword. The sword formation gave these seemingly ordinary swords different characteristics. "Humph, you want to stop us with just a mere method." Tang Jing growled. The War Soul sword shone brightly, the sacred artifact's power completely erupted, and a sword flew out. Shwa. A lightning-like sword light shot out from the War Soul sword, directly slashing towards one of the swords. The person controlling the sword seemed to have sensed the danger and hurriedly retreated. However, it was already too late. Tang Zheng's aura had firmly locked onto the sword. Crack. With a crisp sound, the sword light directly split the sword into two. The sword formation was damaged and its power was greatly reduced. Some of the swords seemed to be drunk as they started to sway. The others were all experts, so how could they miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Thus, they took the opportunity to counterattack. With the sound of battle, the sword formation was broken. The 36 swords broke one after another, and all of the attacks disappeared into nothingness. Everyone smiled knowingly. The tip of their feet tapped on the cliff, and then they soared into the air, steadily landing on the top of the Divine Sword Peak. The sword furnace immediately appeared in front of everyone. The sword furnace was not big. It was like a straw hut, extremely simple and crude. However, in the eyes of an expert, this sword furnace was not simple at all. Every blade of grass and every tree contained the way of the sword. No wonder the sword god was comprehending sword techniques in the sword furnace. This place was indeed unique. Just by looking at it, it firmly attracted everyone's attention. However, their attention was immediately attracted by another matter. Chapter 943. In front of the sword furnace, a figure stood proudly like a desolate ancient sword. His two sword-like eyebrows were raised high, filled with sword intent. Chisha. This person was the sword god's disciple. He had fought with Tang Zheng and the others in the Changbai Mountains. Tang Zheng's expression was slightly cold as he stared at him. Compared to before, Chisha's aura was completely different. His cultivation had clearly improved by a lot. He still remembered Chisha's rising sun sword technique, so he did not underestimate him. However, with so many experts around him, he did not fear him. Tang Zheng, it really is you. Chisha's tone was filled with boundless killing intent. You killed my master. This time I will make you pay with your blood. Chisha, are you the only one? Where is Songyu? Isn't he the one in charge of the sword pavilion? Tang Zheng asked curiously. 7 kills said coldly, cut the crap. You'll have to get past me first. Alright, then I will test your skills. Tang Zheng took a large step forward but was beaten to it by Marshall. Let me. Marshall said, Sword God's disciple, if you miss this opportunity, you won't have it again. The meaning of these words was very thought-provoking. The Sword God's bloodline would no longer exist from today onwards. Therefore she rushed to fight with Chisha. To her, Chisha was a very good opponent to train her martial arts. Ever since she started cultivating the Fire Underworld Divine Palm, her cultivation had greatly increased. Now she had reached the limit of a Xiantian martial artist, 9th grade Xiantian. She was only a step away from the Great Scholar realm. This kind of cultivation speed was simply unimaginable to her in the past. She had once fantasized that if she reached the Great Scholar realm in her 30s, she would already be considered very powerful. But now she was only in her 20s and was actually about to reach the Great Scholar realm. She was even more powerful than her master and master's wife. She was very clear on who the greatest credit should belong to. Chisha understood the deep meaning of Wu's words. His anger burned more and more. He said, Wu, you are in cahoots with these cultivators. I will take your life first and offer it to my master's spirit in heaven. Shwa. He shook the long sword in his hand and performed the rising sun sword technique. The light at the tip of the long sword was as bright as the sun. It slowly rose from the sword as if a red sun had risen from the sea. Marshall crossed his palms, one cold and one hot, the two attributes alternating in the center of his palms. Now she had a deeper understanding of the Netherfire Divine Palm, and she understood more about the extraordinariness of this cultivation technique. When she first started cultivating the Inferno Divine Palm, it was very domineering, very similar to the roaring flame saber that she used to cultivate. But later on, she gradually realized that when things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. When the inner strength that was like a red flame was cultivated to the extreme, it actually gave birth to an extremely cold inner strength. Fire gives birth to cold, and when things reach an extreme, they will reverse themselves. This made her feel the profoundness of this palm technique. It was precisely because of this transformation that her power had advanced by leaps and bounds, and her body had reached a miraculous state of harmony between yin and yang. At this moment, when she used this set of palm techniques, her palms alternated between hot and cold. In the end, her left hand was cold and her right hand was hot. If it was anyone else, they would have been tormented long ago, but she would not. 2 waves of inner strength silently circulated within her body. 7 Kills could also see that this set of palm techniques was extraordinary. He still roared and thrusted his sword forward. The sun-like sword light suddenly exploded, transforming into small sword chi. Like a shotgun, countless sword chi shot towards Marshall like marbles. Marshall did not say a word, both of his palms fiercely pushed forward. A vast and mighty palm wind that alternated between cold and hot swept forward, like a huge wave that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. Bang, 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 a series of explosions rang out as the palm wind and the sword chi collided. The 2 of them tapped their toes and rushed towards each other at the same time. In an instant, in front of the sword furnace, the 2 of them were like graceful butterflies, rising and falling as they fought. Although Marshall did not have a weapon, his hands did not lose to a weapon, especially the Netherfire Divine Palm. Cold and hot alternated, blazing and cold palm wind swept towards the opponent. The killing power was astonishing. Bang! A tree was struck by the palm and broke into 2. Ice gradually formed on the broken part, and even in the summer, it still emitted cold air. 7 Kills just happened to see this scene. His pupils constricted, his heart trembled, and he immediately slashed down with his sword. The sword chi was blazing. His sunrise sword art was also a very masculine sword art, so even the surging sword chi showed a masculine chi, which made people feel as if they were burning flames. The air shook and was slashed to the sides by the sword chi. Then a rainbow pierced through the sun and the sharp sword pierced straight through, directly reaching the top of Marshall's head. Marshall growled, both of his hands rose into the air, clamping down on the sword. The surging sword chi immediately tried to harm her hands, but his palms released 2 waves of inner strength, one cold and one hot, resisting the sword chi. Moreover, the sword underwent a drastic change. One side seemed to be burned by flames, turning fiery red, while the other side seemed to be covered in ice, turning snow white. In addition, the cold and hot energy spread upwards and soon, it reached the sword hilt. The entire sword body turned red on one side and white on the other, presenting a strange scene. 7 Kills' eyes widened as he looked at this scene in disbelief. He roared unwillingly, urging his inner strength to resist. However, crack! With a crisp sound, the sword broke inch by inch, turning into fragments that scattered on the ground. Seeing his sword destroyed, 7 Kills was heartbroken and furious, but there was nothing he could do. With a thought, Wu Xen pushed both of his palms forward. Peng peng, 2 palms struck Chisha's chest at the same time. 7 Kills flew backwards into the sword furnace, leaving behind a long trail of blood in the air. Marshall took advantage of the opportunity to pursue and enter the sword furnace in a flash. This sword furnace was very simple and crude. It was a small pavilion made of straw, surrounded by simple wooden walls. 7 Kills broke the wooden door and entered the pitch-black sword furnace, while Marshall chased after him and disappeared into the darkness. Suddenly, Tang Jing became alert and shouted, "Don't chase after him." In a flash, he chased after him, but just as he reached the door, a figure flew out. His gaze turned cold as he hurriedly caught it. It was Marshall that had fallen into his embrace. Marshall gasped for breath, his face pale, and said, "There's danger in the sword furnace." Seeing that she was fine, Tang Jing heaved a sigh of relief and comforted her. "You step back first, I'll take care of him." Marshall was a little angry. His strength was clearly higher than 7 Kills, but after entering the sword furnace, he somehow suffered a blow and was actually kicked out in a sorry state. "Be careful." Marshall clenched his teeth and warned. Tang Jing nodded his head lightly and walked into the sword furnace with large strides. When he crossed the threshold, a wave of hot air assaulted his face. Taking a closer look, he actually found a huge furnace in the middle of the sword furnace. It was filled with bubbling hot molten iron, and beside it were swords that had not been forged yet. They were bright red and emitting hot steam. 7 Kills stood in front of the furnace, staring straight at Tang Jing. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, his expression was dispirited, but his brows were extremely ferocious. "Tang Jing, you killed my master. I am not skilled enough, so I have no way of taking revenge for my master, but I will not admit defeat," 7 Kills said in a powerful voice. Tang Jing coldly snorted and asked, "7 Kills, you are inverting black and white. If it wasn't for the sword god coming to kill me, how could he have died in our hands? Are we going to stretch out our necks and wait for death?" 7 Kills was speechless. After a long while he said, "I don't care. In any case, master died in your hands. Tang Jing shook his head. He did not want to argue with him and said, I only want to ask you one question. Where are the other people from Sword Pavilion? Where is Song Yu? There were a total of several hundred sword slaves in Sword Pavilion, but they had met too few sword slaves along the way. Furthermore, they did not see any other sword slaves on the Divine Sword Peak, so he was very curious. 7 Kills said sinisterly, Song Yu is the same as you, ambitious and cowardly. When he heard that you were attacking, he actually abandoned Sword Pavilion and escaped with his people. If Master knew in the underworld, he would definitely be ashamed and regret passing down Sword Pavilion to him. 7 Kills was angry and unwilling but also heartbroken. Furthermore, there were 2 handprints on his chest, one red and one white, one fire and one cold, making him look even more desolate. Escaped. Tang Jing raised his eyebrows. This Song Yu was truly cunning. His ability to run away could be considered first class. Back in the capital, he had also escaped when the situation was bad. Now that he had heard the fighting outside, he did not hesitate to escape with a group of sword slaves. Those cowards deserve to die. They listened to Song Yu's bewitchment and have already betrayed Sword Pavilion. They are not worthy of being Sword Pavilion's people. 7 Kills angrily accused. Tang Jing secretly nodded. After all, Song Yu was a member of a large family. He was eloquent and had many methods to bewitch people. Of course, he was not someone who only knew martial arts like 7 Kills could compare to. In the Sword Pavilion, although Qi Sha's seniority was higher than Song Yu's, he couldn't compare to Song Yu in terms of small tricks. This result was not out of Tang Jing's expectations. However, the cooked duck had flown away, which made Tang Jing very unhappy. He asked, where did they escape to? Don't say that I don't know. Even if I knew, I would definitely not tell you. 7 Kills said sinisterly. Tang Jing inwardly shook his head. He knew that he would not be able to dig out any useful information from him. 7 Kills, you were clearly not Marshall's match just now, but you forced her back and even injured her. You haven't used up all your tricks yet, right? This time, I will personally witness your skills because you will not have this chance in the future. Tang Jing had the confidence to say these words. 7 Kills did not refute him, but his eyes kept changing. In the end, he firmly locked onto Tang Jing. He became resolute and said, I will die with you. Boom. With a loud sound, he overturned the furnace beside him. Fiery red molten iron spurted out from the furnace and splashed in all directions. The sword furnace immediately caught on fire. At the same time, 7 Kills grabbed an unfinished long sword from the furnace. The long sword was fiery red and sizzling sounds came from his palm. There was a burnt smell coming from it. However, he did not feel anything. Instead, his face was completely red as he pounced towards Tang Jing. The fiery red long sword in his hand lit up. The light was boundless, as if it really was a blazing sun, releasing all of its light and heat. Chapter 944. Tang Jing subconsciously soared into the air, dodging the magma like molten iron on the ground. A wave of heat rushed over as the 7 assassins stabbed over with their fiery red swords. The blood-like fiery red sword light stung people's eyes. Tang Jing squinted his eyes, and the War Soul sword also released a dazzling light. Clang. The 2 swords clashed and sparks flew everywhere. A few sparks landed on Tang Jing's clothes and immediately ignited. Tang Jing immediately circulated his energy to extinguish the flames. The War Soul sword in his hand danced, and a sword light scattered down, blocking all the flames outside his body. 7 Kills bared his teeth as he looked at Tang Jing. He knew very well that he was burning his life force, but so what? He was going to die together with him. The reason why his fighting strength could increase by so much in an instant was all because of the Rising Sun sword technique that he cultivated. This sword technique was extremely masculine and unyielding. After forcefully enduring the pain and holding onto a fiery red sword, all of his energy and inner strength were channeled into the sword. Instead, he in this unfinished sword had reached the realm of becoming one with the sword, perfectly displaying the power of the Rising Sun sword technique. Clang. Another sword strike. The War Soul sword was undamaged, but a gap appeared on the other sword. Tang Jing laughed coldly. How could an unfinished sword be compared to the War Soul sword? 7 Kills was also very clear about the situation. Looking at the broken sword in his hand, he gritted his teeth and cut open his other palm. Blood seeped out from his palm and dripped onto the broken sword. The blood and the broken sword merged into one, and the broken sword emitted waves of scarlet light. Tang Jing's pupils constricted. He knew that 7 Kills was making his last gamble, so he took the initiative to attack. 7 kills quickly retreated, retreating again and again. Fresh blood completely fused into the broken sword as if it was free. The broken sword's light shone brightly, instantly enveloping him. Bang! 7 kills retreated to the front of the furnace and stepped on the molten iron. However, he did not notice that the molten iron had corroded his shoes and feet, revealing his white bones. He only stared straight at Tang Jing, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. It was incomparably sinister, causing one's heart to turn cold. Tang Jing, do you think that I am courting death by leading you into the sword furnace? Ah, you're too naive. I said that I'll take you down with me. That's why I'm confident. 7 kills laughed maniacally. I don't see how you can take me down with you, Tang Jing retorted. Really? Then do you think this sword furnace is really a broken thatched hut? 7 kills pointed around and asked jokingly. Tang Jing's heart skipped a beat. He looked around. This sword furnace contained sword intent. This was the place where the sword god used to comprehend sword techniques, so it was not surprising that it contained sword intent. It seems like you have seen through some clues, but without my guidance you definitely wouldn't have known. The name Divine Sword Peak is not a random name. The sword intent in the sword furnace is naturally emitted. Back then, Master saw through this point, which is why he chose to comprehend the sword again, build the sword furnace, and forge the treasured sword, because he purposely stopped and looked at Tang Jing with a meaningful gaze. Because what? Tang Jing asked curiously, and his interest was indeed piqued by 7 kills. Because there is indeed a divine sword hidden in the Divine Sword Peak, but the divine sword is formless, only the sword intent, and the essence of the sword intent is all gathered in this sword furnace. Other than Master, only senior brother Jian Shisan and I know this secret. Song Yu, that cowardly fellow, does not know. This sword intent is the foundation of why the sword pavilion is called the sword pavilion. 7 kills said with pride. Tang Jing subconsciously looked towards the ground, where he stepped on a small piece of empty land that was not covered by molten iron. He could clearly feel the sword intent. However, the sword intent was too scattered, as if it had become one with the mountain peak. What use could it have? Master once wanted to forge a peerless divine sword, and had already thought of a way to absorb this sword intent from the Divine Sword Peak. Unfortunately, he did not manage to wait for this day. What Master has not done, I will do for you. As soon as he finished speaking, the broken sword in his hand fiercely stabbed into the ground. The broken sword pierced into the rocks on the ground all the way to the hilt. In that instant, the aura within the sword furnace changed drastically. All of the scattered sword intent quickly condensed and fused into the broken sword. Tang Jing's pupils constricted as he shouted, "Oh no!" and hurriedly slashed out with his sword, aiming for Qi Sha's head with a heavy force. If he was hit, 7 kills would probably be cut into 2 halves. 7 kills revealed a sinister smile and said, "It's already too late." Bang! The War Soul sword slashed through the air, but was blocked by an invisible force. Tang Jing was shocked. He understood that this was the work of the sword intent. Aha, I understand now. The momentum is unstoppable. Tang Jing, prepare to die. 7 kills laughed wildly, holding the sword hilt with both hands. He roared, "Rise!" Ka. The broken sword rubbed against the rocks, making a strange sound. In the end, the broken sword was completely pulled out. The fiery red sword looked as if it was forged from blood. The divine sword has been formed. Quickly die. The broken sword roared and raised both of its hands. Its entire body seemed to be on fire. Its eyes turned fiery red and its clothes emitted bursts of green smoke. As one with the sword, he bathed in the sword light. It was incomparably resplendent and slowly rose into the sky, as if it was really a rising sun. Tang Jing was an expert in the way of the sword, so when he saw this scene he immediately understood the power behind it. He hurriedly activated his cultivation, causing his innate qi to surge. The War Soul sword was good at absorbing yin qi, so it emitted a cold yin qi that enveloped Tang Jing. Kill? 7 kills roared and turned into a ray of sword light. As one with the sword, he slashed towards Tang Jing. Tang Jing's eyes were bright and full of expression. Holding the sword with both hands, he watched as the fiery red sword light got closer and closer. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he subconsciously brandished the War Soul sword. The War Soul sword drew a beautiful arc. It seemed slow and gentle, but it accurately caught the broken sword. Clang! A wave of sword chi surged out, but neither of them retreated. Instead, they clenched their teeth. Tang Jing was surprised to recall that his previous strike was not the heaven-flying immortal sword technique, but the second move of the Taiji two-form sword technique. Back then he had learned a total of 2 moves, but he immediately forgot about them. He did not expect that the second move would appear on its own, causing him to subconsciously use it. The 2 swords were in a deadlock, but Tang Zheng's mind flashed with a flash of inspiration. He actually learned the third move in a split second. Previously he had always wanted to learn the third move, but he had never succeeded. He did not expect that he would actually succeed this time. He really could not understand this sword technique. But now was not the time to think about this. He had just learned it, and before he forgot it he immediately used it. The War Soul sword swung to the left as if there was a huge force pulling the broken sword to the left, and then to the right, drawing a large circle. A surge of energy immediately emerged from the circle. From the inside to the outside, from the bottom to the top, like a fountain, it soared into the sky. Boom. With a loud sound, the energy collided with the broken sword. The 2 swords were knocked away and the 2 people flew backwards. Gotcha. The gap on the broken sword grew bigger and bigger, like a spider web rapidly spreading out. In an instant, it covered the entire sword body, and then collapsed, turning into pieces that scattered on the ground. The light on 7 kills disappeared as well. His entire body seemed to have been sucked dry of blood. He was extremely thin, his body was like firewood, and his eye sockets were deep. He was like a completely different person from before. Tang Zheng was also shocked by this scene. The power of the broken sword was actually so great, and the backlash to its owner was so terrifying. Impossible, how could this be? 7 kills looked at the pieces on the ground in a daze, as well as the monstrous sword chi released from the broken sword. He danced around as if he wanted to gather the sword chi. However, how could the formless sword chi gather towards him? It was all futile. But he was like a madman running around the room. Not long after, his body was set on fire, but he did not know. Tang Zheng secretly shook his head. This person had gone crazy. However, when he recalled the third move, he could not help but be deeply shocked by its power. But he was also dismayed to find that the third move had mysteriously disappeared from his mind, and he had no impression of how to use it at all. Sigh. He faintly sighed. This Taiji 2 form sword technique was too strange. For a moment he could not figure it out. Suddenly, the war spirit sword trembled without any warning, and the sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. Master, quickly absorb these sword chi. Otherwise they will be wasted after they spread out. Tang Zheng was overjoyed. He had actually neglected these precious sword chi. They were already ownerless, so how could he waste them? He immediately activated his power, causing the war spirit sword to shine brightly, and with a sound, it flew into the air. Waves of sword chi seemed to have found their loved ones and quickly gathered in the air. Whoosh whoosh. The war spirit sword continued to absorb, and the light became more and more intense, dazzling the eyes. Tang Zheng was secretly delighted. The war spirit sword had a sword spirit, and was indeed extraordinary. Otherwise, without the sword spirit's reminder, he would have forgotten about this. With the sword spirit absorbing the sword intent on its own, he turned his attention to 7 kills and discovered that he had already fallen to the ground. His body was burning with flames, emitting crackling sounds, and was on the verge of death. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "You also hate Song Yu for betraying Sword Pavilion? I will get him to see you as soon as possible, so that you two can reunite." I can't accept this. I will kill you." 7 Kill's throat still emitted intermittent sounds, his killing intent still did not weaken. Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "If the sword god was here to absorb the sword intent of the divine sword peak, then what he forged would be a peerless divine sword, and what you forged at the last minute is only a poor quality one, which is why you were defeated by my war spirit sword." Chapter 945. Hearing Tang Zheng's analysis, 7 Kills roared unwillingly, but his voice suddenly stopped. His head heavily hit the ground and then there was no more sound. 7 killed. Tang Zheng shook his head, and then placed his attention on the War Soul sword above his head. The War Soul sword had already absorbed all the sword intent in the sword furnace, and the light suddenly converged and then instantly exploded. A glaring sword light lit up, and Tang Zheng subconsciously closed his eyes. When he opened them, he discovered that there was an additional person in front of him. No, this was not a real person because there was no trace of life. It was as if it was formed from interweaving light and shadow. This person's face had a vaguely familiar outline. When Tang Zheng moved his head, he immediately recognized it and exclaimed, "War Soul." This person was actually a miniature version of the War Soul. Back then, the War Soul was just a Yin soul, ferocious and terrifying with a huge body. Now that he had returned to the size of a normal person, Tang Jing was actually unable to recognize him. Ever since the War Soul sword absorbed the Sword Soul and fused with the Sword Soul, the War Soul had never appeared again. Tang Jing thought that it would never appear again, but he never thought that it would appear again. Master, I am the Sword Soul. The other party said methodically. Sword 1 Soul? Tang Jing was stunned. You can actually leave the War Soul sword? The Sword Soul nodded. Yes, I merged with the original War Soul and became like this. It's just that my appearance is the original War Soul. Tang Jing suddenly realized that the Sword Soul was the War Soul. There was no difference. He was overjoyed and subconsciously extended his hand, wanting to touch the other party, but discovered that his hand had directly passed through the Sword Soul's body. He was shocked and hurriedly asked what was going on. The Sword Soul was not surprised and said, Master, after I absorbed those sword intents, I used them to condense them. However, I am not a real entity, I am just a strand of sword intent. Tang Jing patted his head. So that was how it was, but even so, the shock it gave him could be imagined. Then what can you do? Tang Jing calmed down and asked curiously. The sword spirit thought for a while, then gently tapped the ground with his finger. The War Soul sword that was floating in the air did not move at all, but the rocky ground immediately cracked open, as if it was split open by a sword. Tang Jing sucked in a breath of cold air. The power of the sword spirit was indeed extraordinary, and it could attack autonomously. In other words, when he fought with others in the future, the sword spirit could leave the battle soul sword and catch the enemy off guard. Master, as long as you think about it, I can attack the enemy without the help of the War Soul sword's main body. The sword spirit added. Tang Jing nodded happily and praised loudly, Good, good, good. Tang Jing, what do you think of my gift to you? Chiyu's voice rang out. Back then in the sky pit in the northeast, it was with his help that the War Soul sword was able to fuse with the Sword Soul. Otherwise, with Tang Jing's strength, how could he have succeeded in something that even the Sword God could not do? Tang Jing understood this very well, so he was not stingy with his praise for Chiyu. This gift is very good. I like it very much. Thank you. Haha, inner demons, did you hear that? How can your mind assimilating technique be compared to the sword spirit? The sword spirit will be of great use to Tang Jing in the future. Chiyu proudly showed off. The inner demons coldly snorted and retorted, My mind assimilating technique is stronger than your sword spirit. You're a stubborn duck. Tang Jing, let me tell you, as the quality of the War Soul sword increases, the sword spirit will also evolve. In the end, it can even evolve into a physical body. You should be very clear about what this means. Chiyu said as if he was asking for credit. Tang Jing was in full bloom. Of course he understood what this meant. If the sword spirit really evolved into a physical body, then it would be like a sword expert. This kind of expert was condensed from sword intent, and he could not imagine how high his achievements would be in the future. A person's every word and action, even a frown, was a sword intent. If he wanted to kill someone, he didn't even need to attack. The air could be condensed into a sharp sword by him and take his head. He stared at the sword spirit without blinking. It was hard to imagine what kind of scene it would be when that day came. However, there was no doubt that the sword spirit was under his control. Chiyu, thank you. He sincerely thanked him. You're welcome. This way you'll know that I'm really good to you. I'm not like some people who only talk about it but don't practice it. It's just a little bit of profit, yet they dare to brag all day long. Chiyu did not let go of this opportunity to attack the inner demons. The inner demons was silent. He sulked and did not say a word. Tang Jing secretly rejoiced. Inner demons, you better find a big benefit for me and then counterattack Chiyu. This way you can get back at me. However, my benefits are great. Master, I'm still weak for the time being. I can't stay outside for too long. I want to return to the War Spirit sword. The sword spirit said. Tang Jing happily nodded his head. Then hurry up and go in. Don't hurt yourself. With a flash of light, the sword spirit disappeared. It turned into thousands of sword intents and merged into the War Spirit sword. The War Spirit sword automatically flew back into Tang Jing's hands. The sword spirit's voice sounded in his mind. Master, the War Spirit sword's power has increased greatly. The power of your heaven-flying immortal sword technique will also increase by a lot. Hearing this, Tang Jing secretly nodded his head. He held the sword hilt and with a thought, he used the heaven-flying immortal sword technique. In an instant, a dazzling sword light broke through the air. Boom! With a loud bang, the sword furnace exploded. It was already in a dilapidated state, and after being burned by the fire, it was as if it had been hit by a cannonball. It exploded from the inside, and debris flew in all directions, filling the sky. Empyrean Fairy and the rest had been staring at the sword furnace the entire time, especially Wu. Just now, Tang Jing had saved her and rushed into the sword furnace for her. When she heard the sounds of fighting coming from inside, her heart was in her throat. She really wanted to rush in and help Tang Jing, but was stopped by Empyrean Fairy. Empyrean Fairy said that this was a rare opportunity for Tang Jing to deal with it himself, and that there would definitely be no danger. Tian Chanzi also said the same thing. Although Wu was extremely worried, he could only stare at the sword furnace. Lan Yu held her husband's hand tightly with one hand and covered her chest with the other, feeling the intense heartbeat coming from her chest. She was the same as Wu, but after hearing the words of Empyrean Fairy and Tian Chanzi, she endured it. Moreover, she believed in the words of the two and she believed in Tang Jing's strength even more. Seeing the sword furnace ignite with raging flames and the terrifying sword intent that blotted out the sky and covered the earth being released, Lan Yu and Wu almost couldn't help but rush over. The strength of this sword intent caused Tian Chanzi's eyebrows to twitch a few times. He smacked his lips a few times and sighed, "The world is big, there are all sorts of strange things. So that's how it is. I was wondering why this mountain was so strange, so it actually contained such a powerful sword intent." But he still did not move, and Empyrean Fairy was even calmer, so the others did not dare to act rashly. In the end, with a loud explosion, the sword furnace turned into ruins and flew in all directions. Empyrean Fairy stood at the very front. With a wave of her small hand, a gust of wind blew out. The ruins were completely blocked outside, unable to harm them in the slightest. Tang Jing felt his eyes light up and everything suddenly became clear. The mountain breeze blew past his face and seeing everyone looking at him with a burning gaze, he could not help but smile and say, "I'm fine." Wu Fei threw himself into his embrace and said with lingering fear, "It's good that you're fine." Tang Jing ignored everyone's strange gazes and felt her concern and love from the bottom of her heart. He lovingly caressed her hair and said, "I'm fine, don't worry, how could 7 kills hurt me?" Wu Chue said angrily, "It's all because I'm useless. I've practiced the Fire Nether Divine Palm for so long, but I still can't beat 7 kills. Tang Jing shook his head and explained, "No, you've already defeated him. It's just that he used the method of burning his life force, and the sword furnace was filled with boundless sword intent. In that instant, his fighting strength had already risen to the Grandmaster realm, so of course you're not his match." Wu thought for a while, then revealed a knowing smile, "That's good." Cough. Wu Junshan coughed dryly, interrupting their kiss. Wu Junshan's face turned red, and she quickly left his embrace. Lan Yu glared at her husband with hidden bitterness, as if she was complaining about how he had disturbed their good fortune. Wu Junshan helplessly rolled his eyes. Empyrean Fairy did not care about the subtle relationship between the few of them. She stared straight at the War Soul Sword in his hand and asked, "Your War Soul Sword has undergone a change, what exactly happened?" Tang Jing smiled faintly, he did not hide anything and told her everything that had happened in the sword furnace. Everyone was dumbstruck when they heard this. Their hearts trembled in fear, especially Wu. He subconsciously tightened his grip on Tang Jing's hand, unwilling to let go. This time it was a rare time for her and Tang Jing to be alone, so she actually cherished this period of time. Moreover, everyone already knew about her relationship with Tang Jing, so why hide it? She was not the kind of girl who was shy, so she might as well be magnanimous. She did not want to take advantage of Li Xiaotian, who was always by Tang Jing's side. She subconsciously looked at Li Xiaotian and discovered that she was staring at Tang Jing with shining eyes. It was as if his words had a huge attraction that made her unwilling to move her gaze away. Wu's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously grabbed onto Tang Jing's hand. Suddenly he had a subtle feeling, could it be? She hurriedly shook her head. No, although she had changed her appearance and become a new person, she definitely could not have any intimate relationship with Tang Jing. She had to take on the responsibility of supervising him. The others' attention was attracted by everything that had happened in the sword furnace. They were unable to calm down for a long time, especially Tian Chanzi. He looked at the War Soul Sword and said, "So you're saying that your War Soul Sword has evolved, and the sword spirit can already leave the War Soul Sword's body?" This was something he had never heard of before. Even the most powerful divine sword he had ever seen did not have such an ability. Tang Jing nodded. Tian Chanzi sighed in his heart. This was truly the Yangtze River's waves behind the waves. He was afraid that before long, the waves in front of him would be smacked onto the beach. Chapter 946. The Empyrean Fairy lightly said, Tang Jing, the sword soul can leave the battle soul sword body. This is already a 1 in 10,000 chance, but if you want to obtain the physical body you speak of, this is a very long road. In any case, according to what I know, the number of people in this world who can do this can be counted on one hand. Tang Jing's enthusiasm was not extinguished. He still happily said, even so, I have already taken the first step. In the future it is only a matter of time. Seeing him so confident, the Empyrean fairy did not say anything more. Moreover, this was indeed a good thing. Lan Yu was more excited than the others, his eyes shining as he looked at his son and praised, I believe you can do it. Wu Junshan also looked at Tang Jing with gratification. On the way here he once again personally felt that Tang Jing was not ordinary. This feeling was even more profound than the last time he was in the island nation. Thank you. Tang Jing politely nodded towards them. Although he felt a little unfamiliar, it was still much better than before, making Lan Yu and Wu Junshan very happy. Li Xiaotian realized that other than herself, the others were all concerned about Tang Jing. Her bright eyes could not help but dim as she gradually lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. Since Song Yu and the other sword slaves have already escaped, what do we do now? Tian Chanzi asked. Sigh. Tang Jing muttered to himself for a moment, then said, Sword Pavilion no longer exists, even though Song Yu is not dead, but since he has escaped, we will definitely not be able to find him in a short period of time, so there is no need to waste time on him. Let's follow the established itinerary and head to Li Palace. Li Palace had already taken root in a new place. This was the information that Li Xiaotian read in her mind. Since Sword Pavilion no longer existed, Li Palace naturally could not let it go. They had to quickly cut the Gordian knot and take advantage of this momentum to exhaust the strength of the Azure Dragon Hall and the other large organizations. Li Xiaotian already knew that she was from the Li Palace, so when she heard that they were going to attack the Li Palace, her heart couldn't help but tighten. Her expression became panicked, but she quickly regained her composure. She secretly warned herself that since she had decided to sever all ties with the past, this trip to the Li Palace was necessary. In fact, she could only be considered to have truly severed all ties with her former self after this trip. Tang Jing noticed something wrong with Li Xiaotian and asked, Are you okay? Li Xiaotian shook her head and said, I'm fine. She paused for a moment and said hesitantly, Tang Jing, I have a presumptuous request. What is it? Just tell me. If I can do it, I will definitely not refuse. Hearing this, everyone looked at her curiously. With regards to Li Xiaotian, everyone's feelings towards her were rather complicated. However, in general they had already forgiven her. They didn't know that she would make such a presumptuous request. Wu's heart tightened as she stared straight at Li Xiaotian, afraid that she would say something that would make her worried. You said before that I originally knew martial arts, but I lost my memory, so I even forgot my martial arts. Then, can you think of a way to help me recover my martial arts? Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing expectantly, afraid that he would refuse or say that he was powerless. Tang Jing was silent, because he didn't know if he could do it. This was a situation that he had never encountered before. Seeing Tang Jing's reaction, Li Xiaotian's eyes dimmed, the corner of her mouth revealed a bitter smile and said, If there's no other way, then forget it. This is just a fool's dream. This is the punishment given to me by the heavens and I am willing to accept it. Don't worry. Seeing her so pessimistic, Tang Jing hurriedly comforted her. I didn't say that there's absolutely no way, it's just that this is the first time I've encountered such a thing, so I can't think of a good idea right now. But since your martial arts are still in your body, then there must be a way to reactivate it. Tang Jing recalled the scene of the car accident when she saved the little girl. He could confirm that her martial arts were still there, but she needed a trigger condition. Li Xiaotian's heart was once again ignited with the flames of hope and said, Really? That's great. In any case, we still have a long way to go to the Li Palace. On the way, I will think about it carefully and find a way. Tang Jing said truthfully. Li Xiaotian jumped up in excitement, and couldn't help but throw herself into his embrace. In an instant, the divine sword peak became completely silent, leaving only the whistling of the wind. Tang Jing's expression stiffened. He never thought that Li Xiaotian's reaction would be so big. He almost didn't have time to react before he felt a warm and soft body being stuffed into his embrace. He could even clearly feel the soul-stirring elasticity of her chest. Wu originally held onto Tang Jing's hand, and when he saw Li Xiaotian throw herself into his embrace, his eyes widened. The thing he was most worried about had happened. She actually took the initiative to throw herself into his embrace. This was too shameless. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at each other, as if they didn't expect such a thing to happen. The enemy throwing herself into one's embrace was something that only happened in movies. How could it happen in reality, and it even happened to their son? This was truly a headache. Tian Chanzi, on the other hand, had an indifferent expression. He looked at Tang Zheng with a smile that wasn't a smile. Empyrean Fairy was indifferent, as if all of this had nothing to do with her. Tang Zheng wasn't in the mood to enjoy this beauty's grace. Moreover, he also felt strange in his heart. After all, he and Li Xiaotian had been opposing each other for so long, and he wasn't a beast. As long as a woman threw herself into his arms, he would like it, so he pushed her out of his embrace and said calmly, "When I find a way, I will naturally help you." Li Xiaotian nodded his head continuously, the smile on his face becoming more and more brilliant. "Let's go." Tang Jing turned around and left, holding onto Wu's hand. He had seen Wu's reaction just now, so of course he could not provoke her at this time. Otherwise he would not be able to walk in the end, and he did not want his backyard to be on fire because of Li Xiaotian. Sure enough, seeing him tightly holding onto her hand, Wu's expression became much better. She meaningfully glanced at Li Xiaotian, then obediently accompanied Tang Jing down the mountain peak. The two of them took the lead and walked at the front, leaving the others a distance behind. Li Xiaotian fiercely twisted his arm and complained, "She threw herself into your arms just now. Are you very happy?" Tang Jing couldn't help but laugh. The usually carefree Wu was actually jealous. Women's bones were indeed not much different. "You're still laughing. You must be secretly happy, right?" Wu said bitterly. Tang Jing retracted his smile and hurriedly explained, "You are wronging me. I saw that you were beautiful, so I smiled at you. I didn't smile because of Li Xiaotian's hug." Wu heaved a sigh of relief in his heart, and his face immediately revealed it. Although her martial arts were strong in terms of meticulousness and shrewdness, she could not compare to Yi Dingdang. If Yi Dingdang were to encounter such a situation, even if he was very happy in his heart, he would definitely keep a straight face on the surface. Seeing her reaction, Tang Zheng felt relieved. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was around, he turned his head and kissed her. The two of them were about the same height, so he did not need to bend down. He only needed to turn his head to kiss her cheek. Immediately, 2 red clouds flew up on her face. She was extremely shy. On the battlefield, she was a decisive expert. But in front of love, she was still no different from an ordinary girl. She raised her fist as if massaging it and hit Tang Zheng's body. She said coquettishly, "You are too bad. Everyone else is watching." Tang Jing chuckled, "They are still behind. How can they see? Moreover, even if they see, they will pretend not to see. They will definitely understand the principle of not looking." Flowery words, sophistry. Wu glared at him and said, "You don't want me to say it? Then I'll go tell the person behind me." Tang Jing rolled his eyes and said with a mischievous smile, "You dare." Wu immediately widened his eyes and glared at him like a tiger eyeing its prey. Tang Jing laughed out loud and quickly kissed her again. This time he kissed her lips, causing her entire body to tremble. She could not help but lean against him tightly, her entire body going soft. Tang Jing directly hugged her waist. She struggled a few times, but was unable to escape from his clutches, so she let him do whatever he wanted. Although she was shy in her heart, she enjoyed it very much. Occasionally, she would glance back and see that the others were still far away. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief. At least they did not see her embarrassed state. The road down the mountain was not long, and the two of them enjoyed a rare intimate time. By the time they reached the foot of the mountain, Wu's face was already red and he was panting. If it wasn't for the fact that this place was not suitable, the two of them would have already fought for 300 rounds. Wu did not want the others to catch up and discover his embarrassing state, so he immediately pulled away from Tang Zheng and circulated his energy to calm his surging emotions. His cheeks and breathing slowly returned to normal. The others finally caught up. Although they discovered that the two of them had normal expressions as if nothing had happened, they knew that something must have happened between the two of them. They deliberately pretended not to know and did not point it out. However, Lan Yu looked at Wu with eyes full of praise and encouragement. He thought to himself that it was not a waste of his daily guidance. This girl had finally become enlightened. There were too many women in the family, and it was impossible to spread the rain and dew evenly. This was a rare time to be alone, and if he was still hesitant, it would be snatched away by others, such as Li Xiaotian. She subconsciously looked at Li Xiaotian, but found that his expression was normal, as if nothing had happened. Her heart was moved. Li Xiaotian had always been known for his intelligence and cunning. Although she had lost her memories, this kind of nature still existed. In terms of scheming, he would probably surpass Wu. She immediately felt a sense of danger. She had to keep a good relationship between her son and Wu. She could not really let Li Xiaotian snatch her son away. Moreover, the Holy Maiden of Li Palace had also cultivated charm techniques. In terms of dealing with men, she was even more formidable. Many women could not compare to her. Chapter 947. The chirping of birds and the fragrance of flowers, untainted by the mortal world. The scene in front of them was such a scenery, making one feel relaxed and happy. But the more beautiful something was, the more dangerous it was. Tang Zheng firmly believed in this point, so his mind became vigilant. Moreover, after his last visit to the Li Palace, he was even more afraid of the methods of the Li Palace. At this very moment they stood in front of the new Li Palace. Just like the previous Li Palace, it was magnificent and enchanting. Perhaps this had to do with the fact that the Li Palace was filled with women who liked these flowers and plants. Li Xiaotian stared blankly at this scene. She had no impression of this. Although she felt that it was beautiful, she subconsciously felt a sense of danger. She subconsciously warned, "This place is very dangerous. Everyone must be careful." Hearing her say this, the others dared not underestimate them. After all, this was the Li Palace, where Huaxia's intelligence network was the most advanced. Moreover, the Li Palace's palace master, Granny Li, was the most sinister and cunning. Her territory was not a place that an ordinary person could set foot in. This was still a mountain valley. On both sides of the valley were layers upon layers of mountains, but they were like two slender and elegant women guarding the entrance to the valley. With Li Xiaotian's experience, Tang Zheng walked along a special winding path with great familiarity. The others cautiously followed behind him. Sense Sigma. There's an array set up in this mountain valley. If an ignorant person were to recklessly charge in, they would fall into the array. As Tang Zheng walked, he explained. He couldn't help but recall those bathing women he had met in the Li Palace. That was an illusion created by the fragrance of the flowers on the mountain that confused one's mind. This time they were familiar with the path and no similar situation occurred. When they passed through the long entrance to the valley and arrived at its center, the scene before them was even more beautiful and moving. It was like a paradise. Tang Zheng thought that the Li Palace was truly formidable. It was actually able to find such a beautiful place in the middle of these rolling mountains. If this place was developed into a tourist attraction, the people of the country would probably flock to it like a flock of ducks. He shook his head, casting aside these random thoughts and focusing his attention on the front. There were no lofty palaces here, only small bridges and flowing water. In the distance there were many wooden houses. It was like a village with a few scattered women walking through them. Suddenly an ear-piercing voice soared into the sky. Tang Zheng cried out in alarm. Just as expected, although they had successfully passed through the valley, the moment they appeared in the middle of the valley, they were still discovered by the vigilant Li Palace disciples. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, a series of whistling sounds came from afar, and a group of people rushed in front of them in the blink of an eye, blocking their way. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from the crowd. Everyone looked at Li Xiaotian in surprise and subconsciously shouted, "Saintess, why are you back? You're not dead?" The disciples of the Li Palace had also been misled by the news sent back by Song Yu, mistakenly believing that Li Xiaotian had already died in the battle for the imperial city. They had never expected that he would once again stand in front of them, alive and well. Their faces immediately lit up with joy as they welcomed her warmly and cheered, "Saintess, everyone thought you had died. If the palace master knew you were still alive, he would definitely be very happy." Looking at these familiar faces, Li Xiaotian didn't know how to respond. He stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. "Wait a moment." An ear-piercing voice rang out from the crowd. A woman stepped forward and pointed at Tang Zheng's group, asking, "Why are they here? These people are all enemies and there are even men." The Li Palace had a rule that forbade men from setting foot in. If a man did, there was only one outcome: death. Moreover, although these people had never personally seen Tang Zheng's group, they were still intelligence collectors, so they had seen their pictures and recognized them at a glance. These were enemies, so why had they appeared in the Li Palace? And why had they appeared together with the Saintess? They immediately sensed something strange. "Saintess, just what is going on?" They subconsciously took a step back and warily asked. On the way here, Li Xiaotian had already learned a great deal about her relationship with the Li Palace, and she also understood that she was the Li Palace's Saintess. When she heard the crowd's questions, she was at a loss at first, her mind in a mess, but for some reason she was quick-witted and quickly calmed down. As if this place had triggered a nerve in her, the panic in her eyes disappeared in a flash, replaced by an unrestrained sharpness. Without being angry, she took a large step forward, eyeing the crowd like a tiger eyeing its prey. Seeing her overbearing gaze, the crowd subconsciously averted their gazes, not meeting her gaze. After all, her usual dignity was still there, deeply imprinted in their bones. Tang Zheng had originally believed that he had been exposed, so a fight was unavoidable. Now that he saw Li Xiaoyan's reaction, he actually had the misconception that the decisive and ruthless saintess of the Li Palace had returned. But he was not in a hurry to make a move, and instead quietly observed the situation. The others also curiously looked at Li Xiaotian. On the way here, because of Wu and Tang Zheng, Li Xiaotian had become much quieter. Although she would occasionally raise a few questions about herself and the Li Palace, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Li Xiaotian swept her sharp gaze across the crowd and said, "My matters, when did you have the right to question them?" This voice was not loud, but it was filled with an unquestionable dignity, causing everyone to be subconsciously startled. This tone was exactly the same as the previous Li Xiaotian's. The Li Palace disciples lowered their heads. Normally, Li Xiaotian had this kind of attitude in the Li Palace. She was the high and mighty saintess, the chosen candidate for the next generation's palace master. Other than the palace master, everyone else had to listen to her orders, and no one had ever dared to question her actions. Tang Zheng and the others were even more surprised than the Li Palace disciples. This was because Li Xiaoyan's change was too great, as if she was a completely different person. It made people wonder if she had really lost her memories. However, this thought only flashed through their minds. This was because they were certain that Li Xiaotian had really lost her memories. All of this was an act, but the act was too perfect, no different from the real thing. This was the amazing part. Lan Yu's eyes flickered as he sighed in his heart. Although Li Xiaotian had lost her memories, many of her body's intrinsic qualities had not been lost, such as this quick-wittedness. If it was anyone else, perhaps they would have already panicked and revealed their true colors. But Li Xiaotian calmed down in an instant. She could simply take the crown of Best Actress. Li Xiaotian is really too smart and cunning. Although her nature is not bad, if she occasionally has a little thought, others would not be able to detect it. They are simply not her opponent. It may not be a good thing to keep this kind of person by my son's side. Lan Yu had this preconceived idea. The more he watched Li Xiaoyan's perfect performance, the more he felt it was unreliable. Li Xiaotian looked at the crowd with a fierce aura and asked, "Where is the palace master?" "The palace master has already left for some time." Li Xiaotian frowned. "Where did she go?" "Holy maiden, did the palace master leave before you left and still not return?" "Only you know where she went." Li Xiaotian was shocked. How could she remember where the palace master went? But she still did not reveal it. She nodded slightly and said, "Then I know. Holy maiden, these people are enemies. Why did you bring them to the Li Palace?" If the palace master knew, she would definitely fly into a rage. Someone cautiously glanced at Tang Zheng and the others, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the end, he could not hold back and asked. Li Xiaotian coldly smiled and mysteriously said, "This is the palace master's arrangement." If you can also comprehend the profound meaning within, then wouldn't you all become the palace master? Everyone hurriedly lowered their heads and said with fear and trepidation, "This subordinate does not dare to question the palace master's decision. Since it is the palace master's order, then we will carry it out." Tang Jing sighed in his heart. Li Xiaotian had really given him a big surprise. Turning hostility into friendship, there was no need to use swords against each other. These ordinary disciples of the Li Palace did not pose too much of a threat to him. His main enemy was Granny Li. As long as she died, the others would be scattered soldiers and disbanded like a sheet of loose sand. Seeing that he had shocked these people, Li Xiaoyan's lips curled into a faint smile. He lightly nodded and ordered, "Quickly prepare a room. I want to entertain these guests." "Yes." Someone hurriedly left. Tang Zheng and the others looked at her in astonishment. They did not know why she had stayed behind. Since Granny Li was no longer in the Li Palace, then they should go find her. But in front of so many disciples of the Li Palace, they could not refute her decision. Otherwise they would definitely be exposed. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. In the end they decided to wait and see. They followed her to the center of the Li Palace. In the village with a small bridge and flowing water, there were many houses built in picturesque disorder. Along the way there were many people secretly sizing up this group of people. The Li Palace was filled with women. Besides the women who were outside collecting information, many of the women had never left the Li Palace in their entire lives. They had never seen the outside world and had never even seen a stranger. They lived every day in this palm-sized place. So after dispelling their hostility, many people were very curious about this stranger who had come for the first time. Once everyone had been properly settled and the others had been dismissed, the cold and harsh expression on Li Xiaoyan's face disappeared. He smiled and said, "I'm sorry. I did not ask for everyone's opinion before making this decision." Everyone was silent. They stared at him without blinking. Li Xiaotian was somewhat alarmed. He hurriedly said, "If it's not appropriate, we will leave now." Tang Jing broke the silence and asked, "Tell us your reason. Why should we stay?" Li Xiaotian breathed a sigh of relief and confidently said, "At that time they said that the Li Palace Empress had already left and that no one knew where she went. Moreover, it seemed that only I knew. I thought that perhaps if we stayed we could track her whereabouts. This would be more advantageous to us. Otherwise, finding a needle in a haystack would be too difficult." Hearing this, everyone's eyes brightened. At that critical juncture, he was able to think of so many things. His meticulousness was truly not something an ordinary person could compare to. Seeing that no one had any opinion, Li Xiaotian said, "I acted on my own accord. I hope that everyone will not take offense. In the future, I will definitely discuss this matter with all of you." At this moment, he was like a completely different person from before. It made people wonder if he was the same person. Chapter 948. Hearing Tang Jing say that he knew where Granny Li went, everyone looked at him curiously and urged him to speak. Tang Jing had previously learned from Li Xiaotian that Granny Li went to the northwest, but he did not know what she was going to do. However, looking at it now, she had been gone for such a long time that it was definitely not a small matter. What could be in the northwest? The desert. There was also the Tree of Life. Perhaps only the Tree of Life could attract so much of her energy. Previously, Tang Jing did not pay attention to this news, but now he realized that he had overlooked such an important piece of information. She went to the northwest desert, probably for the Tree of Life. Tang Jing said, "The Tree of Life?" Everyone was shocked. Besides Li Xiaotian, everyone had more or less heard about the Tree of Life, especially Wu Tianchanzi and Empyrean Fairy. "The Tree of Life is extremely important, we cannot afford to lose it." Tianchanzi's expression was serious. The Tree of Life was related to the destiny of this world, and even the opportunity to advance to a large world, so it could not be lost. Li Xiaotian looked at everyone blankly and asked, "What is the Tree of Life?" "It's hard to explain in a few words." Tang Jing shook his head and did not explain further. Li Xiaotian's brows flashed with a trace of disappointment, but he did not ask any more questions. "This matter should not be delayed, then we will immediately leave for the northwest desert." Tianchanzi was impatient. Tang Jing was about to nod when he heard Li Xiaotian say, "There is something I want to discuss with everyone." "What is it?" "There are so many people in the Li Palace and not all of them are bad people. Even if they do bad things, many people have no choice but to do so. Can you not kill them?" Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing with shining eyes and pleaded. No one expected that she would plead for mercy for the disciples of the Li Palace. They could not help but have a strange expression, as if this was too different from before. However, when he thought about how she had sacrificed herself to save a little girl whom she had never met before, it was not difficult to understand her actions. Li Xiaotian looked at Tang Jing nervously and asked, "Can I?" Along the way, she had seen them slaughter the flying guillotine of the Azure Dragon Hall and the Sword Pavilion sword slaves. Her heart was moved for a moment. There were so many girls outside and quite a few of them were still underage. They were all newcomers nurtured by the Li Palace. If she really did kill them, how could she bear to do it? Tang Jing suddenly laughed and said, "Who said I was going to kill them? I'm not a homicidal maniac." Li Xiaotian was stunned for a moment and was pleasantly surprised. "Really?" Tang Jing nodded. Of course what he said was true. Li Xiaotian immediately showed a brilliant smile, grateful. "You are really too kind. Although these people have made mistakes in the past, they do not deserve to die. I believe that they will be able to turn over a new leaf. Moreover, if you defeat the palace master, then these people will be like a group of dragons without a leader. We can still think of a way to take them in for our own use." Hearing her idea, everyone was astonished. So she actually had such a plan, one that no one else had considered. Seeing that Tang Jing was somewhat unconvinced, Li Xiaotian said, Perhaps you don't think highly of their fighting strength, but according to what you said, the Li Palace's fighting strength has never been the Li Palace's strong point. The Li Palace's key value lies in its intelligence network. Everyone's eyes brightened. Although Li Xiaotian did not have a sufficient understanding of the overall situation, her words had pointed out the crux of the matter. This was truly commendable. Although her words were reasonable, Tang Jing did not completely agree. After all, these people had been nurtured by the Li Palace for so many years. If he wanted them to pledge allegiance to him, it would not be an easy matter. If he made a mistake, he would just be lifting a rock and smashing his own foot. Li Xiaotian was incomparably intelligent and immediately sensed Tang Jing's thoughts. She volunteered, "I can guarantee that I can take these people in and have them serve you." Her every move was unexpected and made everyone have a whole new level of respect for her. Tang Jing and the others looked at each other in dismay, as if they were pondering over the meaning of her actions. Seeing that she kept looking at him, Tang Jing did not want to disappoint her and said, "If you really have the confidence, it's not impossible to give it a try." Li Xiaotian happily nodded her head, "Don't worry, I will definitely succeed." After pausing for a moment, she continued, "It's just that there is a problem right now, and that is that I have not recovered my martial arts. For the time being, I can still suppress them, but in the long run I will definitely be exposed." "So you want to recover your martial arts as soon as possible? Can I?" Tang Jing muttered to himself for a moment, then said, "On the way here, I have already thought of a method. However, whether or not it will succeed, I am still unable to make a conclusion. However, it is still worth a try." "That's great." Li Xiaotian was so excited that she almost jumped into Tang Jing's embrace. However, seeing that Marshall had been eyeing him covetously, she finally resisted this impulse. "When do we start?" Seeing her impatient appearance, Tang Jing laughed involuntarily and said, "We won't be staying here for too long. Let's do it tonight." "All right, after dark I will secretly come here. I will not let anyone find out." Li Xiaotian's eyes lit up as she said. Hearing that the two of them were going to be together in the middle of the night, Marshall's nerves immediately tensed up. She fiercely glared at Tang Jing. Tang Jing could only bitterly smile. His heart did not have any messy thoughts. Li Xiaotian excitedly left. Since she wanted to subdue these people for her own use, she naturally had to quickly familiarize herself with everything here. Therefore she did not want to waste any time. As soon as she left, the others all began to talk at once. "Tang Jing, you really want to help her recover her martial arts and hand Li Palace over to her?" Tian Chanzi was the first to ask. Tang Jing nodded his head, "I feel that there is nothing wrong with this. Without Grandma Li, Li Palace's threat to us will be greatly reduced. Even if Li Xiaotian does not succeed, it doesn't matter. Moreover, the disciples of Li Palace are all unstable factors. Since we cannot kill them all, it is best to restrict and manage them." The more Tang Jing thought about it, the more he felt that Li Xiaotian's suggestion was not bad and was very feasible. "But what if she takes this power into her own hands and turns it against you?" Wan Yu asked. Tang Jing thought for a while and resolutely shook his head, "I don't think so. You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. Moreover, did you notice that although she has lost her memories, many of the instincts hidden in her body still exist? For example, her ability to react on the spot is something that anyone can do?" Lan Yu asked. "That does not mean that she is a bad person." Tang Jing retorted. Lan Yu tried to persuade him, "Yes, you can't. But perhaps it can also explain a problem. Who knows, one day she will return to her former self. Especially if she recovers her martial arts and controls Li Palace, her ambition will swell. People will change." Tian Chanzi nodded in agreement. "I agree." Seeing the two of them standing on the same front, Tang Jing did not know whether to laugh or cry. But she really did save people. Just now she even advised us to let the others live. Isn't that kind-hearted? Tian Chanzi said, "Tang Jing, people's hearts are sinister. You must guard against them." Tang Jing muttered to himself for a while. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he finally shook his head and said, "Although what you said is reasonable, I feel that people should have the opportunity to correct their mistakes. As long as she has the intention. Of course, you can rest assured that if I find that she is showing signs of returning to her former self, I will personally extinguish those signs." Seeing that he had already made up his mind, the others did not try to persuade him any further. In the dead of night, many people had already gone to bed. Tang Jing stood alone in front of the window. Suddenly there was a gentle knock on the door. He hurriedly opened it. Chapter 949. Tang Zheng incessantly circulated his true qi, which stimulated Li Xiaotian's inner strength bit by bit. Her inner strength resisted, slowly flowing along her meridians in an attempt to force the true qi out. Advancing and retreating affected every part of her body, every nerve. She grimaced in pain, continuously sucking in cold air, and her entire body was covered in sweat. Boom. Suddenly her dantian was like a dam bursting. Her inner strength rushed out like a flood, violently surging towards her true qi. Tang Zheng gave a knowing smile. It was not as difficult as he had imagined. Her true qi finally succeeded in stimulating her inner strength. This strand of true qi was too thin, it was not a match for the surging inner strength, so Tang Zheng controlled his true qi and quickly withdrew. Immediately the inner strength began to circulate on its own, circulating a small cycle in her body, and then slowly settling in her 8 extraordinary meridians. The pain on her face completely disappeared, replaced by an incomparably comfortable feeling. In addition, she felt that her entire body was filled with strength, as if she could kill a cow with a single punch. 4 eyes met, her bright eyes were filled with Tang Zheng. She couldn't help but say, "I feel like I'm filled with strength." "Then get off the bed and try," Tang Zheng encouraged. Li Xiaotian somersaulted in the air, jumping from the bed to the ground. She punched out, creating a burst of sound. Her legs swept out, creating a strong wind that swept across the chair leg, breaking it. Only then did she restrain herself, pleasantly surprised as she looked at her own hands and feet, as if she didn't recognize herself. At the same time, the martial arts returned to her mind like a tide. Each move, each set of techniques was incomparably clear, as if they were deeply engraved in her mind. "How is it?" Tang Zheng asked with a smile. "My martial arts have safely recovered. I feel very powerful, as if I'm number 1 in the world." Tang Zheng couldn't help but laugh. Number 1 in the world is still far away, but it's enough to deal with the disciples of Li Palace. "That's good, Tang Zheng, thank you." Her eyes lit up as she looked at Tang Zheng. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She was full of charm. Tang Zheng's head moved. He seemed to feel that her every move was much more charming than before. In the dead of night, there seemed to be some complicated emotions brewing between the two of them. Suddenly, a fragrant wind blew in his face, and Tang Zheng felt that there was another person in his arms. She was sweating profusely and her clothes were already drenched. Her thin clothes seemed as if she wasn't wearing them at all, and they clung tightly to Tang Zheng's body. Their elasticity was quite great, causing ripples in one's heart. Tang Zheng suddenly remembered that she was someone who had practiced the art of seduction. Before she had practiced martial arts, she had also restrained her art of seduction. Now that she had recovered her martial arts, her charm technique was naturally revealed, which was why he felt that her charm had increased by a lot. With such a soft jade in his arms, Tang Zheng couldn't help but feel restless. However, he still firmly pushed her out of his arms without leaving a trace. He said, "This is what I should do." Li Xiaotian didn't show the slightest difference. She faintly smiled and said, "Since I have already recovered my martial arts, I don't plan on going to the Northwest Desert with you. I want to take advantage of this time to reorganize the Li Palace and take them under your command." "So anxious?" Tang Zheng was surprised. Li Xiaotian nodded. "This kind of matter shouldn't be delayed. Will you be fine by yourself?" Li Xiaotian was full of confidence. "My conclusion is that I have a lot of prestige in the Li Palace. In addition, my martial arts have also completely recovered. The others are not my opponent. Even if there are some people who find the slightest clue and want to resist, as long as I rope in the majority of people, these people will be like small raindrops falling into the ocean, unable to make a big wave. All right, since it's like this, then we will leave tomorrow. You be careful, go back and rest first." Seeing that he had ordered him to leave, Li Xiaotian did not stay any longer and left. Dong dong. Another series of knocks sounded. Tang Zheng was confused. Could it be that Li Xiaotian had returned? Was there something else? Crick. He opened the door and saw Wu Qiao standing at the door, staring at him resentfully. "Why are you here? Do you think I've disturbed the two of you?" Marshall's jealousy was not small. Tang Zheng laughed involuntarily. "What's the matter? I only helped her successfully recover her martial arts. Nothing happened." "Humph, if something really happened, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you." "Then what will you do?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. Marshall thought for a moment. "I will go find Li Xiaotian to settle the score. Since she dared to seduce you, I will not let her go." Seeing her jealous look, Tang Zheng couldn't help but laugh. "No one is seducing me. I only see you now." I won't seduce you. Is that so? But why does my soul fly away when I see you? Tang Jing said with a mischievous smile. He pulled her into his embrace and closed the door. Without giving her any chance to refuse, he directly sealed her mouth. She struggled for a moment, then completely fell into his fiery passion. During the day the two of them had been rubbing their heads together, kissing and kissing each other. At this moment, in the dead of night, a single man and a single woman were in the same room. Everything that happened next was a matter of course. The next day the sun rose high in the sky, and the sunlight shone in through the gap in the window, shining on the two naked people on the bed. Their arms and legs were intertwined, and they were bathed in the mottled sunlight, which added a bit of temptation. The two of them opened their eyes in a daze and looked at each other. The corners of their mouths revealed a knowing smile at the same time. Marshall lightly punched his chest and said coquettishly, "Last night, you were the one who refused to let me go. If I go out now, others will definitely see me. How do you want me to face others?" When Tang Jing's hands started to become unruly, Marshall was too lazy to resist and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. Last night, she had almost turned into a pile of mud. In the end, she was at his mercy and unlocked several embarrassing postures. In any case, they all know about our relationship, and it's not like it's something shameful, so there's no need to hide from them. Moreover, your master and mistress should really want to see us together. Tang Jing advised. Humph, do you think everyone's face is as thick as yours? Marshall rolled his eyes and said with a flash of inspiration, "Fine, it's good to let them see so that some people don't have any ideas about you." The two of them were well aware of who these people were referring to. Tang Jing shook his head and smiled bitterly, saying, "I really don't have the slightest relationship with Li Xiaotian, so don't be jealous. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind doing some morning exercise this early in the morning." Seeing the evil smile on his face, Marshall hurriedly begged for mercy. The two of them put on their clothes and went out together. The others had long since woken up and looked at the two of them, smiling meaningfully. Marshall wished she could find a hole to hide in. Even if she was facing a fierce enemy, she would not be so timid. She really wanted to hide behind Tang Jing, but was held tightly by Tang Jing so she could not hide at all. She glared fiercely at Tang Jing, but he turned a blind eye to it, making her so angry that she clenched her teeth. He directly led Marshall to the few of them and greeted them with a normal expression. Everyone woke up quite early. Tian Chanzi pointed to the sun in the sky and said, "Is it still early? The sun is already shining on our buttocks. I think some people were too tired last night so they couldn't get up." Tang Jing said seriously, "I've been running to so many places in the past few days. I've been fighting continuously. It's indeed very tiring." Seeing him speak nonsense in such a serious manner, Tian Chanzi was defeated and gave him a thumbs up, saying that he was strong. Empyrean Fairy did not participate in the two's banter and directly asked, "What was the result of last night?" "Success." Tang Jing's smile disappeared as he said seriously. Lan Yu's face stiffened. She did not think that they would actually succeed. Not only was Li Xiaotian intelligent and resourceful, but she also had a high level of martial arts. She was like a tiger that had grown wings. If she really had any thoughts about Tang Jing, then it would be even harder to guard against her. She frowned and looked at Tang Jing with worry, as if he would be snatched away at any moment. Empyrean Fairy was not surprised because this was in line with her predictions. She said, "Then there is no need for us to stay here." Wu Junshan also nodded. "Yes, in order to avoid any problems, we should immediately leave." Tang Jing nodded. "I've already discussed it with her. We will leave today and she will stay." "What, she will stay?" The others were shocked. "What will she stay for?" "She wants to strike while the iron is hot and take over this place. She wants to take over these people and use them for herself." Tang Jing revealed Li Xiaotian's plan. Lan Yu muttered, "Her ambition is not small to be so impatient. Madame Wu is too kind. Time waits for no one, so of course I have to hurry. I hope that when you return in triumph, everything here will be under control. At that time, you will be able to add a new force to Tang Jing's strength. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" Li Xiaotian heard Lan Yu's words and walked over from afar. "Are you really that confident?" Lan Yu asked skeptically. Li Xiaotian smiled faintly. "When you return in triumph, won't everything be clear?" Sensing that there was a bit of gunpowder between the two, Tang Jing hurriedly interjected. "Since she is so confident, then we will do as she says. However, staying here is also very dangerous, so you should be careful." Li Xiaotian smiled charmingly, not forgetting to remind him with concern, "You should be the one to be careful. We don't know what dangers there will be. Tang Jing hurriedly looked away and did not meet her gaze. He calmly said, then we will leave first. If the others ask, do you have a way to deal with them? Don't worry, I will handle everything. This matter should not be delayed, then we will leave immediately. Tang Jing decided. He did not eat breakfast and directly prepared to leave. Sure enough, before they had even walked a short distance, someone jumped out and stopped them. Holy Maiden, why did these people come and then leave? Li Xiaoyan's face was as cold as frost. She coldly stared at the other person and said, this is a secret of the Li Palace. Do I have to report to you what the palace master ordered? Her cold eyes stared straight at the other person. The other person was the one who had questioned Li Xiaotian yesterday. Chapter 950. This woman was called Ying Yu and was also Granny Li's personal disciple. Li Xiaotian coldly looked at Ying Yu and asked, you stopped them. What do you want? Ying Yu's charm was only slightly inferior to Li Xiaotian's, but she was still publicly acknowledged as a great beauty. She raised her head to Li Xiaotian and said, you've changed a lot since your return, as if you've become a different person. I have reason to suspect that you've already betrayed the Li Palace. Her insight was unique, hitting the nail on the head. When the others heard this, they began to whisper to each other. Li Xiaotian did not panic in the slightest, nor did he become angry. On the contrary, his lips curled into a sneer. Although she had never known Ying Yu before, after yesterday's inquiries she had gained a general understanding of the Li Palace without leaving a trace. She had the most thorough understanding of Ying Yu because she had long ago predicted that she would make a move, but she had not expected it to be so soon. Ying Yu, don't you find this accusation laughable? I am the holy maiden of the Li Palace, so how could I betray the Li Palace? Li Xiaotian retorted. Although Ying Yu also felt that her suspicion was somewhat absurd, this was her intuition and she had to speak it out. The human heart is unfathomable. Even if you're the holy maiden, it's not impossible for you to betray. Ying Yu refused to let go. Haha, laughable. I see that you're the one who's betrayed the Li Palace, betrayed the palace master, and that's why you're trying to drive a wedge between us. Li Xiaotian struck later, but his words were aimed directly at Ying Yu's weak point. The others all looked at her. After all, no one else had jumped out while she had blindly jumped out to accuse Ying Yu. This was enough to make her credibility drop a few notches. Li Xiaotian very cleverly used this point to his advantage, so many of the spectators began to tilt the scales in their hearts. Ying Yu thought to herself that this was bad. The holy maiden was resourceful and had a sharp tongue. Not only could she not gain any advantage with her words, she could also easily be dragged into a ditch. She hurriedly retorted, I am loyal and devoted to the Li Palace and the palace master. I have no disloyalty. You're the one who is venomously slandering me. Li Xiaoyan's eyes grew cold. Since you have no disloyalty, why are you questioning the palace master's decision? Scram. Li Xiaotian berated. Ying Yu's face flushed red. Suddenly he raised his head and said, I won't move. These people are enemies and you lured them here but you didn't do anything. I can't just turn a blind eye to this. They must stay and wait for the palace master to return. Then everything will come to light. Then can you take responsibility for delaying the palace master's important matters? Li Xiaotian pressed. A trace of panic flashed through Ying Yu's eyes before she quickly regained her composure and said, I will bear all the consequences. If palace master punishes me, I will not complain. She was making a bet this time because she really thought that everything was too strange, so she chose to follow her heart. Li Xiaoyan's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. This person's determination was beyond his expectations. Facing such a strong pressure, she did not shrink back at all. Do you think you can just say that you'll bear the consequences? How much weight can your shoulders bear? Li Xiaotian asked jokingly. Ying Yu's face was red. In fact, she felt a bit guilty. In any case, I can't let them go. I am the holy maiden. Since the palace master is not here, you must listen to me. Do you want to go against your superiors? I don't. If you don't, then move. No. The others couldn't stand it anymore. They knew that Li Xiaoyan's anger was about to erupt. They quickly pulled Ying Yu to persuade her. However, Ying Yu was like a stubborn bull. Because this time she had offended Li Xiaotian, she decided to stake it all on one throw. Holy maiden, if you have the guts, then let them stay and wait for the palace master to return. What qualifications do you have to negotiate with me? Li Xiaotian stepped forward and glared at Ying Yu. Ying Yu's martial arts were not as good as Li Xiaotian's. Being suppressed by her aura, her heart raced but she did not retreat. If you want to let them go, then you have to step over my body. Is that so? Li Xiaotian smiled faintly. Yingyu panicked. She suddenly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, Li Xiaotian glanced at the other disciples of the Li Palace and scolded, "What are you standing there for? Disobeying the Holy Maiden's orders, have you forgotten the punishment?" They were shocked as if they were facing a great enemy. They replied with a yes, and then surrounded Yingyu. "What are you doing? Yingyu, you disobeyed the Holy Maiden's orders and went against your superiors. This is a betrayal of the Li Palace. Hurry up and surrender, otherwise we won't care about our friendship," they loudly said. When the other people that Yingyu had secretly tried to win over saw this scene, they all chose to remain silent, not daring to help her. It was just that the Holy Maiden's reputation and prestige were too great, so they had no choice but to shrink back. When Tang Zheng and the others saw this scene, they couldn't help but look at Li Xiaotian in a new light. Although she had lost her memories, her methods were not bad at all. She had actually taken the initiative so quickly and made an example out of them. With Yingyu as a precedent, even if the others had any ideas they would be quickly snuffed out. At this time, Tang Jing somewhat believed in Li Xiaotian's plan. Lan Yu's eyebrows furrowed even tighter. Yingyu looked around at the crowd that was glaring at her like a tiger watching its prey. She flew into a rage. "Li Xiaotian, you're distorting the truth, I'll fight you to the death." So, her martial arts were much higher than the average disciple of the Li Palace, so before the others could react, she leapt into the air, flying over their heads and pouncing towards Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian stood in her original position, not retreating a single step. Suddenly she stretched out a hand and pointed at Yingyu's chest. In a moment of desperation, Yingyu's door was wide open, and there were too many flaws to be found. Li Xiaotian didn't waste any effort and quickly attacked her weak spot, defeating the enemy in one move, valiant and formidable. Yingyu staggered backwards, falling to the ground in a sorry state. The other Li Palace disciples hurriedly surrounded her and captured her. "Li Xiaotian, I'm not done with you," Yingyu roared with a heart-wrenching voice. Li Xiaotian didn't even look at her, directly walking in front of Tang Zheng and the others. She couldn't help but say, "You guys leave first. Then this matter." Tang Zheng glanced at Yingyu, whose eyes seemed like they were about to spit fire. Li Xiaotian faintly smiled, brimming with confidence. "I can handle it, don't worry." Tang Zheng was infected by her smile, nodding his head in understanding. "Then you have to be careful, goodbye." After he finished speaking, he walked out of the valley with the others. The others looked back at Li Xiaotian from time to time, seeing that she had already walked in front of Yingyu. No one knew what she was talking about. When they had completely left the valley, Lan Yu curiously asked, "How do you think Li Xiaotian will deal with that person? Li Xiaotian won't kill her, right?" Marshall was also very curious. Everyone looked at Tang Zheng, clearly wanting to hear his answer. He muttered to himself for a long time before saying, "I think Li Xiaotian won't kill anyone, she is a kind person at the bottom of her heart. It's just a person, what's the difference between killing and not killing?" Tian Chanzi shrugged, not finding it strange at all. If she kills, then it means that she is no different from the previous Li Palace Holy Maiden, and in the future she will also become our enemy. Lan Yu said worriedly. Marshall's heart tightened as he subconsciously looked at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng did not say a word as he continued to walk forward. Empyrean Fairy suddenly broke the silence and said, "No matter what kind of thoughts she has, Tang Zheng has already left her far behind, so she won't be able to cause any big waves." These words hit the nail on the head. No matter how powerful Li Xiaotian was, she still could not be compared to Tang Zheng. Even if the worst result was that she recovered her memories, she would not become enemies with Tang Zheng. Because she was a smart person, this kind of person was the best at judging the situation. In the past, she had no choice but to become enemies with Tang Zheng. Now that she had a choice, why would she choose such a bumpy road? This was not Li Xiaotian's style. Tang Zheng did not think so much. Other than his trust in Li Xiaotian, he had more confidence in the soul-searching technique. How could the memory loss caused by the soul-searching technique be so easy to remove? So he was not worried about Li Xiaotian recovering her memories. In short, the group left the Li Palace and set foot on the road to the northwest desert. Everyone retracted their thoughts, but when they thought about how Grandma Li had been in the northwest desert for so long, they felt a little uncertain. What kind of problem had caused her to pay so much attention to it? The desert was like a painting that slowly unfolded in front of everyone. Walking in the hot desert, if it was an ordinary person, they would have already been unable to hold on, but for them, this was just a piece of cake. Heat waves hit their faces and yellow sand filled the sky, but traces of spiritual energy were transmitted from the heat waves. Tang Zheng, Tianchanzi, and Empyrean Fairy were the most sensitive to spiritual energy, so they immediately discovered this point. They looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Logically speaking, it was impossible for such an environment to have such abundant spiritual energy, so the only possibility was the Tree of Life. Tang Zheng had walked through this area before, but at that time, there was no spiritual energy. It seemed that the Tree of Life had greatly transformed the environment of this world, so much so that even this almost barren desert was full of spiritual energy. The three of them could not help but feel happy. The more spiritual energy there was in the world, the more advantageous it was for cultivators like them. The other three were martial artists, so they were not so sensitive to spiritual energy. Seeing their reaction, they asked curiously. Tang Zheng gave a simple introduction, and the corners of their mouths showed a bitter smile. If cultivators were strong, then it would be difficult to maintain the status of martial artists. However, when they saw Tang Zheng, this idea was thrown to the back of their minds. As long as it was something beneficial to him, what did it matter if they suffered a little loss? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.